host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. All right. Happy Thursday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I do want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. I want to give a shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And welcome back, guys. We have a big show tonight, ladies and gents. Tonight's theme is Truth Hurts. Yes, it does. The truth does hurt. We do have special guests that we are going to bring on in just a second. But first and foremost, I do want to go ahead and show you that thumbnail, ladies and gents, so you can see what else we are discussing tonight. Hey. It has been a crazy week, ladies and gents. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, our special guests, we call them, they are whistleblowers. As our special guests are Anthony Aguilar and Josephine Gilbo. You probably have seen them before, whether it's on some of those TikTok videos or maybe you've seen them on other shows. They have quite a bit to discuss. We're going to bring them on in just a second. We're also going to discuss, this is really interesting. This is up in the news. Kamala Harris, I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but of course she is on a book tour called 170 Days, something like that. Kamala Harris apparently has been making the rounds, and she is pointing fingers at one person in particular for the reason why she did not win the presidency. She is calling out names, and one of them is Joe Biden. So this is being brought to the fold here. Everybody is talking about this. We're going to get into that story. We're also going to discuss Tucker Carlson is releasing a 9/11 docu-series. Now, that was supposed to be released today. It is not posted as of yet, but he did talk about it. We're going to get into that discussion. Don't forget to answer that poll when you get a chance, ladies and gentlemen. How do you feel about the narrative around September 11th? Let me know. We're also going to discuss Brian Berletic. Jumped in on this conversation. Brian Berletic is based in Eurasia. He is actually going to give you the lowdown about these protests in Nepal and what this is really about. So I think a lot of people are celebrating this, not realizing that this is not something to celebrate. So Brian really broke that down. I talked to him earlier today. We're going to show you that. And last but not least, this is a pretty interesting story here. Red states versus blue states. There is a viral video that is going around, and it is making a comparison between a red state and a blue state. And the blue state just happens to be one that I live in. So, yeah, just one that I live in. And so I just want to debunk some of the things that are said in this viral video. And I do want to make sure that I also give you some information that is omitted from that part of the conversation. I think that people are sending this message that those of us that live in the blue states, we have everything together and we don't have disparities. And that is absolutely not the case. So we are going to make a comparison there, ladies and gents. So how's everybody doing? Cool. For those of you who are wondering, we're just waiting just a second. I know Anthony's in a little bit of traffic, so I'll wait till he can turn on his camera. I already posted a video about Charlie Kirk that was uploaded earlier today. With everything going on tonight, I knew I wouldn't have time to discuss it tonight. So if you haven't seen that, check that out when you get a chance. Again, tonight's theme is Truth Hurts. Let's go ahead and give a shout out here to Sabby patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support. Really do appreciate you, fam. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, There's also a group called Sabsters. I don't know if everybody's familiar with them. We also have the Sabbies. Don't forget about those peeps at all, folks. And of course, we also have a group called Members. All of their names are listed here, and you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen during the live stream, ladies and gents. Hey, hey, hey. And we will shout out newbies on Sunday. It's been quite a crazy, busy day today. OMG. Let's go ahead and get into some of the comments. We're going to wait till Anthony can turn on his camera. Shout out to Joe for becoming a new member. Give Joe a big whoop whoop. And shout out to Patricia Johnson for becoming a new member. Let's give Patricia a big whoop whoop in the house. Thank you, Michael, for the super chat. Never forget George Bush, Dick Cheney, Barack Obama, and Hillary Clinton should all be rotting in prison. 9/11, 2001, 9/11, 2012. Free Palestine. Yeah. Guys, don't forget to answer that poll question. I'm curious to see where everyone stands on that particular issue. So before we bring in our special guests, let me just see a chat here. Okay, thank you, Eric. Before we bring in our guests, I do want to show you what happened with them. So for those who are not aware, Anthony Aguilar and Josephine Gilbo, they are whistleblowers. You may have seen this video, you may not have seen this video, but this is one of the things that I think we really need to shout out here, ladies and gents. Colonel Anthony Aguilar and Captain Josephine Gilbo arrested for speaking against genocide. Everyone check this out. I want you to watch this before I bring them out.
The United States government is complicit in genocide. You have an obligation to the Constitution of the United States. I'm a disabled veteran.
There's a genocide! There's a genocide! Stop!
You are all complicit in genocide.
Ma'am, you're not allowed to film in here. We told you this earlier. You're complicit in a genocide! You're complicit in a genocide! Eddie, there's a genocide! Eddie, there's a genocide! Come on, Eddie. There's a genocide! You're complicit in genocide of the Palestinian people! You are complicit! Come on, Eddie! Eddie, help us! Eddie, help us save them! Come on, Eddie! The Israeli terrorists are committing a genocide, and the U.S. Congress and Senate are complicit in funding the bombs that are forcing children to be slaughtered and massacred. Shame on this government. The United States of America is complicit in genocide. The Israeli terrorists are starving children.
If they'll arrest veterans, they'll arrest you.
Stop the bombs! Stop the bombs! Stop! Shame on you! You're complicit! This is your legacy! This is your legacy! Why are they arresting you?
They're arresting us for speaking out against genocide.
Stop the bombs!
The U.S.
Stop
Congress
the bombs!
is paying for the death of children,
Slaughtering babies!
women and children.
Stop slaughtering babies! We are being arrested right now for interrupting a foreign affairs hearing on nominations because the U.S. is complicit in genocide. They are complicit in the slaughter of babies.
When the United States Congress comes after veterans, they will come after you. Every American sitting at home right now needs to realize that you are paying for a genocide.
Rise up! Rise up, America! Rise up! It is time to take back this country from these corrupt politicians. It is time. It is beyond time.
We're going out to the loading dock.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and bring on Anthony. Anthony is here. He is a retired Green Beret Lieutenant Colonel. His name is Anthony Aguilar. Let's go ahead and bring him on. Anthony, so nice to meet you.
It's a pleasure. It's an honor to be on your show, and thank you for inviting me and letting me share this message. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I have so many questions for you. First of all, I think that you are incredibly brave. For one, I come from a military family, so I know how the military works, and not as many people are willing to speak out. So first and foremost, thank you for your bravery. I want to start with this video that we just showed. You and Josephine were arrested there for speaking out. How long were you arrested? And I guess for me, I'm just asking. I'm just baffled that they would just handcuff and take away veterans that way. The same politicians that claim that they care so much about the veterans. So you were detained there. How long were you detained for?
It was a few hours. Once we were in the um in custody, they took us down to the loading dock. That was a little weird because down in the loading dock, it's like they wanted to hide us, and then they brought in the Capitol Police paddy wagon. They practically stripped me. They took, you know, everything off and patted me down to extent and and then put me. They put Josephine in the and I in the paddy wagon and took us to the Capitol jail. We were there for a few hours. It was a little bit. The Capitol Police, the Eddie and the other gentleman, and then the folks at the Capitol Police Station were, for the most part, I would say, kind. There was an individual individual by the name of Lieutenant Ford that was kind of being kind of a tool, but that's expected. But we weren't in custody too long. I would say that, even being in custody and under arrest for even 1 minute as a citizen who was protesting and in clear of my rights in the First Amendment. We were, there are rules of decorum inside the chamber, and the, in to me, in terms of protesting and petitioning, protest and petition are guaranteed in the First Amendment. And furthermore, as a service member that spent 25 years in the Army, in the last quarter century, I have fought in every war this country has gone into: Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Tajikistan, the Southern Philippines, places where most Americans don't even know we're fighting war. And to have my, as I held my right hand and the Constitution in my hand and have me jerked down and handcuffed, and for the committee chair, Senator Risch, to say, off to jail. Despicable. So to the members on that committee that sat there and allowed that to happen, you'll hear it from me right now. You're cowards.
They are, and they're all bought and paid for. At least most of them. You took a big stand, Anthony. I think the first channel I saw you on, I believe, was the Gray Zone, and so you saw something in Gaza, and you decided to speak out about it. You were talking about what happened at these humanitarian aid sites. Right now, Benjamin Netanyahu and other politicians in Israel have been spreading this lie that Israel is not starving people in Gaza, that it is not true that the IDF soldiers have said that they were told to shoot Palestinian peoples as they come to retrieve aid. But you saw something happen. Can you explain to everyone what you saw?
Starvation is happening in Gaza. There is a genocide. The starvation, the displacement, the dehumanization, the engineered famine is not an accident. It is happening. And the United States, through the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, is a complicit tool in the engineering of this genocide. This is an engineered genocide. What I saw in Gaza could be described as nothing more than an absolute departure from every humanitarian principle. As I've said, I deployed to wars in war zones that I thought I had seen the worst. When we pushed through Raqqa and we were in Baghouz Fakhani and ISIS surrendered. I thought that was the worst that I'd see. In Mosul, in Fallujah, I thought that was the worst that I'd see. When I went into Gaza, what I witnessed made me sick. There's no words to even describe it other than inhumane, an apocalypse, a dystopian apocalypse, man-made. I saw starving children, women and children that were starving, providing them very little food, and then they had to beg for their rations, beg for the food, and even then there wasn't enough, providing them no water. That was all by design. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation designed that process through a contract with the Israeli government that the United States tax dollar is paying for. In Gaza, on an event, on an incident, I shared a moment, an engagement with a young boy. His name was Amir. And to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that lately has come out with a press conference refuting that, shame on you. To the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, you're cowards. You're absolute cowards. Hiding behind corporate, hiding behind PR firms, won't talk to me. I offered, won't talk to me, won't release footage, won't release the information, just lies, lies, lies. The young boy that I saw on site number 3, secure distribution site, or SDS 3, was in the south, but near southern Khan Yunis. This young boy, whose father had been killed in an airstrike, they were at home, and their home was hit by a bomb that the United States provided, indiscriminately dropped, killed his father, separated from his family, and moved to the Khan Yunis UN displacement camp, where a family took him in. On that day, he was on that site with his uncle. On his way to that site, he was separated from his uncle, one of his only family remaining, and of a family that took him in, mind you, because the crowd was shot at by machine gun fire from the Markava tank, and the crowd was scattered, and he was separated. And when he got to the site, he had no parents, he had no family, an 8-year-old boy. I know he was 8, or excuse me, an 8-year-old boy. And I know he was 8 years old because I spoke to his mother. I spoke to his remaining family, those that were looking for him, that hadn't seen him. Since my picture posted when I told his story, his biological mother hadn't seen him since and had been looking for him and was finally able to identify that someone had seen him alive in the last few months. When that boy and I exchanged the conversation, in the videos and pictures, there's a contractor that's standing next to me. And Amir walked up to us and he kissed the contractor's hand standing next to me. He turned toward me, and if those of you have seen the video and the pictures, he's carrying these food items in his hand. He doesn't have a box of food. He doesn't have a meal. We're not feeding him a meal. Scraps that this young boy picked up, who walked 10, maybe 12 kilometers with no shoes. And he wanted to thank us. He wanted to tell us thank you. And he said, I'm very hungry and thank you, shukran, or thank you in Arabic. And he was sincerely grateful. And he kissed my hand, and I placed my hand on his shoulder and talked to him and just, basically telling him that, and really most of the Palestinians, under the severe conditions they're under, they are hopeful, grateful. The willpower amongst the Palestinians and their will to live is incredibly inspiring. And this young boy said, thank you. And I had said, it's time to go now. It's time to go, because the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, control the sites. They tell us when to open, when to close. And they told us over the radio that the Palestinians had to leave. So I told him to go home. And as he's leaving with the crowd and they exit the site, which is on, corroborated by the IDF actually saying it too, that they shoot at the sites, they shoot at the civilians. The video from the BBC showing Palestinians ducking in the dirt and ducking for cover as bullets from a Markava tank machine gun fly into them. That image you see in that BBC interview is the intersection of the road out of secure distribution site 3 as it intersects the Mirag corridor. Exactly where Amir and others with him were gunned down. And that young boy, like many more, thousands thousands have been killed indiscriminately. Indiscriminately. Under what sin did they commit? Because they came to get food. Because they were a nuisance. Because they ventured too far off a road. This is the reality in Gaza. This is the reality in Gaza. And the United States is a part of it.
Yeah. I mean, this is the big thing. And I think that Israel is trying to do everything that they can to continue their PR, their plan here to try to convince people, because they've seen the polls. The polls are showing that Israel has lost support from Americans. The majority of Americans do not support Israel, and that is why I believe we're seeing Netanyahu do this podcast tour where he's going on to so-called independent media or YouTube media. At this point in time, they're trying to rebuild their reputation, which is why I should say this is the only time I think I'll ever tell anybody do not platform this person, because they are coming on to spread propaganda and paying some influencers to do so as well. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, I think sometimes when people hear the word humanitarian, they think, well, that should obviously be a good thing. What is it about the GHF? I know you said like they're a part of this. What are they doing?
So first of all, the actual Gaza Humanitarian Foundation does not care about Gaza. They do nothing humanitarian. And they're not even a foundation. They're a shell company. They exist as this very hard to define, non-compliant, immune-like entity that has no accountability. Who are they? I don't know. Johnny Moore, a Christian Zionist, a spokesman named Chapin Fay, who gets angry at everybody and tells everybody they're liars. According to Chapin Fay, everybody's a liar. Doctors, surgeons, me, the IDF, everybody's a liar. Everybody's Hamas. It's the only thing that comes out of Chapin Fay's mouth. If it's raining, Hamas did it. He's a liar. He's a grifter. So the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was established in the wake of the ceasefire ending in March and the stoppage, the complete blocking of UN aid going into Gaza. That wasn't an accident. That's not something that just happened because UNRWA or the UN couldn't do it. Benjamin Netanyahu stopped the aid going in for a very specific purpose, to starve the population. The starvation, the displacement, I'm telling you, I've seen the plans. It's part of their operational plan. To think that Israel's plan in Gaza is falling apart and failing is not true. Their plan is going exactly as they intended. To wipe out the population, to take every inch of the land. That's what they're doing. We can see it on TV. So the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was stood up by a hatched plan between Christian Zionists and the Israeli government to give the perception of delivering aid against the international outcry for, you can't starve these people to death. And the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is the perfect Trojan horse wrapped in this bow of humanitarian aid. And it is not. It is a tool of the destruction. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation hasn't spent any time in Gaza. Safe Reach Solutions, a company owned by the CIA, or a 30-year veteran of the CIA, so who all of his staff are former special covert CIA. And I know this for a fact. This is not me assuming. I've met them. They've stated this. So we have an organization in Israel working in Gaza where everybody is controlled or owned or previously worked for. I'll be accurate. Previously employed by the Special Activities Division of the CIA, who employ a security company, UG Solutions, where the lead contractor is the national chapter president of the Infidels Motorcycle Club. Look him up. You can find him on Facebook. What does this club stand for? The fight against jihad and the elimination of all Muslims from the earth. That's who we have delivering food to the Palestinians in Gaza. So whenever you hear anything come out of GHF, remember that, America. Remember that. A CIA-run operation led by the Infidels Motorcycle Club, armed to the teeth with fully automatic weapons, who have a vested interest in denying anything I have to say, because what I have to say is going to send them to prison. What I have to say is going to shut them down and send them to jail for war crimes. What I have to say is going to shed light on the truth that the United States is being kowtowed and pulled around by Israel and told what to do, with spending our money doing it. That's the truth, America. We're being dictated and pulled around by a former government, by another foreign government. Think about that. That's what the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is. Right now, as we speak, tonight, as we sit here, I'm in Washington, D.C. As we sit here and talk, as Israel continues its invasion of the north into Gaza City. And I want to remind everybody, weeks ago, we all said, that won't happen, that won't happen, that won't happen. Diplomacy will set in. We'll have ceasefire talks. That won't happen. And it's happening. Ceasefire? Kiss that goodbye. Why? Because Israel flew jets into Qatar and tried to blow up the members of the negotiation party. Who does that? You know who does that? Tyrants do that. Tyrants do that. Evil tyrants do that. And America, we're behind it. How do you think F-35 jets flew from Israel over Jordan, over the entire landmass of Saudi Arabia into Qatar and dropped bombs? By magic? How did the radar defense systems not activate? Who runs those? We do. We have the largest military presence and airfield out in the Middle East in Qatar. And yet we allowed it to happen. Those F-35 jets had to refuel en route in order to get to their objective. Who do you think did that? We did. America. We are complicit in this, and it must stop. This is not our values. This is not who we are as a nation. Put a stop to it. We the people. Last time I checked, we the people. And we the people don't fund, kowtow, support, and give away our tax dollars to a foreign government to spread tyranny and hate across a region. And that's what they're doing. As we speak tonight, in Gaza, the Israeli Defense Forces are continuing their assault in the north. 60,000 additional IDF soldiers that have been called onto duty are being replaced into the force to also invade from the north, from the south and from the north, squeezing every last living human being out of Gaza City. You can watch it on the news. I don't care if you're a Fox News dad or you watch CNN or wherever you take your news from. You can see it. Buildings being leveled, mosques, schools, and hospitals being leveled, reporters being killed in front of our eyes, and we're letting it happen. Anyone surviving, anyone that survives the offensive must go to the south. There's nowhere less to live. There's nowhere to go. The only place that any surviving Palestinian can go is all the way down south, a 20 to 26 kilometer journey, depending on where they're coming out of northern Gaza. And when they get there, you know what they're greeted by? A concentration camp. A concentration camp that the United States built. Our $30 million grant in taxpayers' dollars went to build that concentration camp. And on that concentration camp, you know who's standing guard? An American contractor, likely a member of the Infidels Motorcycle Club. And when these Palestinians get to that site and they're hungry and they're starving and they don't have any water, do they get water? No. Do they get food? Barely. How do they cook it? I don't know. There's no kitchens. There's no food kitchens. And when they get there, you know who's there to greet them? An American with a biometric enrollment device. The same one that I used in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria. The Seek cross-match enrollment device. And what do? They get their fingerprints taken. They get their iris scanned. They get a photo. And they go into a database. And if they don't get any food. America's doing that. And where does this database go? Right into the IDF. Goes directly to them. How do I know this? Because I saw it. I was a part of it. I witnessed it. I saw it every day with the Israeli Defense Forces sitting side by side with American contractors in Kerem Shalom at the Operations Center, observing everything and dictating everything we did. This is not an American project. This is the Israeli government dictating what America does, using us. Because When the curtain comes down and the world sees what's happening in Gaza, when the last Palestinian survivor enters this camp, those that haven't died of dysentery and polio and starvation because there's no running water and there's no electricity and there's open sewage and thousands die from sickness alone. You know who Israel's going to blame? Us, America, the United States. And don't think for a second that they won't do it. They just did it last week when they bombed Qatar and they said, we allowed them to do it. Our president of the United States said, we didn't know and we didn't have anything to do with it. Well, Benjamin Netanyahu back in Tel Aviv was already proclaiming success and telling everybody that Israel did it and the U.S. knew about it. They did it alone, but that the U.S. knew about it. Israel is not our friend nor our ally. In America, if you don't want to be sitting at home watching the 9 o'clock news, seeing Americans come home in flag-draped coffins because of a war that Israel drags us into, do something about it now. Because tomorrow is too late and we are running out of time.
Anthony, it's crazy to me with the ceasefire talks. I stopped covering the ceasefire talks on this show because it's a joke. It's an absolute joke, and I feel like it's just something to, I guess, string like Americans or pro-Palestinian, supporters along into making you think that they're trying to come up with the resolution, something that is going to help the Palestinian people. But it's a joke, and I feel like this was decided a long time ago. And what's really sad about all of this is that because of religion, and I don't know how you feel about religion, but some people are using the religion excuse to say, well, the Bible says this, yada, yada. And I've debunked that on the show like multiple times before. But how do you get across, like, Anthony, I know you're traveling, you're talking to different people. How do you get this message across to people like the evangelical Christians? How do you get this message to them?
Well, I'm doing my best to get it to them. Whether they'll listen or not, I don't know. And to be honest, some people may think that I've been living under a rock. Maybe I have. I have no social media. I mean, the last social media I had was MySpace, and I was the last guy. Tom was like, "Hey, man, I'm shutting down. You gotta. Sorry, you're not even a paid subscriber. You're a free subscriber. I can't afford it. You're the only dude on the platform." So I was like, "Man, Tom, it's been 10 years. Sorry." That was my last social media. I have nothing. I'm not looking for fame. I'm not writing a book. I don't like to write and I don't like to read. I, when I retired from 25 years in service, I was working in the garden center at Lowe's and I loved it. My position on this and what I tell everybody is when someone, it was actually last week I was at a conference and someone asked me about Johnny Moore, the GHF CEO, saying he's a Christian Zionist. And I was like, hey, let's not call people names. Let's not be insulting. Like, I don't think we need to go. And they're like, that's not a name. That's what he is. And I was like, well, I think you're probably being judgmental. And they're like, no, like Christian Zionism is a thing. And I was like, what is it? Sorry, didn't know. So I looked into this and I started to realize, I was like, oh my God, what are we doing? How do we have Mike Huckabee as the ambassador of the United States to Israel and he's a Christian Zionist, is proclaiming the end of the world? Really? That's who we want in charge of American diplomacy? Come on now. We built our country on a separation of those ideals and those beliefs from that the citizens in this country can all have equal representation. That's who we have in our government? That's not the America I know. So to the Christian Zionist and who it'll reach, the truth is they know the truth. The truth is a Christian Zionist knows that we are going to kill and remove every Palestinian from the land. They know that. It's part of the plan. So I don't know what to tell them other than, where's your humanity? What are we doing? When my whole position on this, when I first got home from Gaza and I first got back in the United States, I didn't seek the media. I went to Congress. My first stop was the office of Senator Van Hollen, Senator Bernie Sanders, any congressman that would take me. And it wasn't just Democrats, it was Republicans and Democrats that I talked to. And one thing they could all agree on Can we not? Can we all just agree that we just don't starve and murder babies? Can we just agree with that? Can we start there? As a human race, as a country, as a world, can we start there? Christian Zionists won't even meet you there. Oh no. Starving and killing babies is okay as long as it meets the objective. And that doesn't sit well with me. It's not something I can accept.
How do you deal with, since you're back in the States, has anyone tried to harass you, Anthony? Do you have protection? I'm a little concerned. Like, are you protected? Has anybody tried to come after you because of the information that you're putting out there?
I have been threatened, many fronts. What's interesting to me is that the recent revelation in a BBC article that I believe came out, it's either yesterday or the day before. I'm not sure. I don't. But it basically was an expose on the Infidels Motorcycle Club and their connection to UG Solutions and Safe Reach Solutions and the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. That story did not come from me. I did not release that story. I'm not even mentioned in it like that. When that hit, I was like, wow, that doesn't look good. But yeah, I've been threatened by members of the Infidels Motorcycle Club. I've been threatened by individuals that say that I'm a Hamas supporter, and I would like everybody to know I do not condone nor do I support Hamas or violence in any way. That's the rhetoric of Israel. Why are we repeating Israel's rhetoric? Why are we repeating things like, I will tell everybody right now, anybody, here I am. I'll meet you on the high ground. If you want to talk to me about patriotism, if you want to talk to me about sacrifice, if you want to talk to me about putting one's life on the line for our country, I've written a blank check to this country every time I've deployed to combat. I've been shot in combat. I've been shot fighting America's wars. I have had brothers and sisters die in my arms fighting in America's wars. You want to call me not a patriot? I'd say you're a coward. Here I am. Talk to me. When the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation wants to call me a liar, they won't take my calls. They won't respond to my emails. They won't accept my invitations to meet me on podcast to talk. The only media outlet that the GHF will go to is Fox News and MSNBC. Well, awesome. That tells you enough, doesn't it? When they want to besmirch me and say things like, Aguilar's a liar, the boy he claimed is Amir is still alive, and then they put up photos of a child that doesn't even look like him. In fact, that exposes the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation's racist, bigoted attitudes of all Palestinian boys look alike. The picture of the boy they put up doesn't even look like Amir. It's laughable. It is laughable. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and Chapin Fay remind me of Baghdad Bob during the invasion of Iraq in 2003. This guy on the news with all the microphones around him. There are no Americans in Baghdad as the 3rd Infantry Division is blasting through downtown Baghdad. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, they are evil. They are corrupt. They have no intention of providing any relief, humanitarian or otherwise, to Gaza. What is the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation? They are the pathfinders to claim land. Why are all of the sites that are in Gaza, in the south, over the most valuable real estate of once was Gaza? Rafah, rubble to the ground, where the rich minerals and oils and natural gas and the best positions along the beautiful Mediterranean Sea. And that's where Gaza, and that's where the GHF has planted its flag. There's no one there to feed. Why? Come on, America. The America that I grew up in and the America that I fought to defend doesn't put up with that bull.
Anthony, are there other service members who share your same concerns? I often wonder. I mean, I know we've seen some that have spoken out. There was also a service member. He was in the Air Force. He self-immolated. because he did not support what was happening in Gaza. Are there other service members who share your same concerns, but they're afraid to speak out?
Absolutely, absolutely. There was a non-commissioned officer, a sergeant first class. He's been portrayed on social media. I don't want to say his name because I don't want to uncomfortably out him, but he has been on social media. He's been on a few platforms that I've been on as well, who simply by social media posts of saying that we shouldn't support Israel in a genocide, and he was punished for that. Now under investigation by the Department of War. That's where we are now in this country. The Department of War is now investigating him for speaking out. It's atrocious. What I would remind everyone, and people get this wrong, for those that didn't serve, that are making comments about my service, shut up. Ain't got time for it. Don't want to hear it. For those that have served, that criticize my service, remember your oath. As a United States Army officer, I was not enlisted. I was not a non-commissioned officer. I was commissioned into the United States Army at a time of war. And as a United States Army officer, when I raised my right hand and I swore an oath, I didn't swear an oath to the president. I didn't swear an oath to the Congress. I didn't swear an oath to a company. I didn't swear an oath to a political party. I didn't swear an oath to the officers appointed over me. I swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States of America, period. To defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That's the oath I took. And that's the oath that I lived for 25 years. So if anybody wants to talk to me about understanding what patriotism is or speaking out against X, Y, or Z, you don't know what you're talking about. And if you think you know what you're talking about, here I am. Let's talk. The truth is, I support our Constitution. I support American values. I have no political objective in anything that I'm saying. I have no personal gain in this. I make no money. I'm not sponsored or backed by anybody. I don't have a GoFundMe page. I don't have any social media. TikTok and followers or whatever the thing is called. I don't know. TikTok? I was just corrected. TikTok, not TikTok. All these platforms, like I don't have any of these platforms. I don't care what anyone's opinion or what anyone thinks about me other than the fact that I have to live with myself. I can't turn a blind eye to genocide. I can't turn a blind eye to children being starved and killed in scale. Thousands of children. I can't turn a blind eye to that. And I can't turn my back on our values. So for anybody that wants to call me names or label me a certain way, go ahead. I don't care. I'm not left. I'm not right. I'm not down. I'm not blue or red. I'm not this or that. I'm none of that. I'm an American. And man, I believe in our values. And I believe in we the people and having a voice and having a voice in how our taxpayers' dollars are spent. When a U.S. service member who served 25 years and sacrificed, when most of these congressmen, most of these senators, I'm not saying all, most, were going to get their law degree at Harvard or Yale or Amherst and hanging out in frats and sororities and talking about what it means, what American strength means. You know where I was? Rucked up in Afghanistan, in a vehicle in Sadr City, in the Battle of Fallujah, north in Mosul, fighting in the Anbar province, Helmand, Afghanistan, Aruskan, Kabul, Kandahar, the southern Philippines in Mindanao, fighting the Moroz Liberation Front, in Tajikistan, fighting against ISIS Khorasan and his extended parties. So when you were sitting at a bar trying to impress people on what you knew, I was there. So what I have to say now about what America is doing in a land where there is a genocide, and you want to question me, let's have that discussion. I'll gladly have it.
Anthony, do you believe the number Of 50,000 people in Gaza. I can tell you I don't. I think it's hundreds of thousands of people that have been killed in Gaza. Do you believe there's only 50,000 people that have been killed?
I do not. I believe that the death toll already to this date, that the death toll in Gaza is close to or north of 300,000. Why do I think that? Well, because in Gaza, when you see the entire city of Rafah leveled to the ground and not a thing stands, those people didn't make it out of those homes. When you drive by those homes and the smell of death, dogs scavenging through human flesh that's left in these buildings that are crushed to the ground, where no one's even gone in to get the bodies out because they can't, and the IDF have just left them there. The stench of death. There are far more than 50,000 dead in Gaza. The encampment, this humanitarian assistance village. Remember, during the Holocaust, when Germany moved, just one example, when Germany moved all of the Polish Jews out of Warsaw and took them to central Germany for their own good, relocation camps to die. That's what we're doing now in Gaza. This GHF, humanitarian assistance village. Come on now.
Yeah.
What do we have? We have Goebbels writing our script. It's a concentration camp. That concentration camp at capacity and its maximum capacity can only hold about 1.5 million total. That will soon then be what? I don't know. Transported where? What's going to happen to them? So if the population of Gaza is 2.18 by the 2017 census, consider birth rate before the war, post-war birth rate and death, and how many have died? Probably looking at about 1.6 million that are still alive in the entire enclave. So what happened to those other 400,000? They didn't leave. That's for darn sure. They're dead. And the reason Israel doesn't want Western media or Western reporters or independent reporters, and why they want to kill every reporter that's there, the most dangerous thing to have in Gaza is a camera.
Yep.
And when they're killing everybody that can tell the story, it's because they're hiding something. And what are they hiding? Hundreds of thousands of deaths. And for the world to think that that can't happen, that can't happen, that can't happen, surely it's not. Our grandparents, one generation removed, lived through the generation of never again, never again, never again. Surely that's not happening. And when we discovered the concentration camps in Germany and we saw the magnitude of death at scale of starvation and murder, we said never again. And here we are, watching it happen again. So anyone out there that says never again, stand up and say something. Because your bumper stickers and your yellow ribbons and your we stand with Palestine signs doesn't matter. I will tell everybody right now on the record, and I will state it, that by the time the question of Palestine comes to the United Nations General Assembly on the 23rd of September, and people stand to say that they recognize Palestine, too little, too late. There won't be a Palestinian people or a Palestinian state to recognize, because they'll all be concentrated in a concentration camp in the south of Gaza, guarded by who? Americans.
It's really sad. Anthony, I know that you're in DC right now. Are you still speaking to politicians about this? What is your goal in DC currently?
So yesterday, I joined a team of Doctors Against Genocide. While we were there, we were waiting in the main lobby, and the Doctors Against Genocide, excuse me, they were wearing their lab coats. They're all professionals, doctors, experts in their field. I'm honored that they allowed me to join them in delivering this message on House Resolution Block the Bombs, a House resolution to protect healthcare workers in Gaza. Can you imagine that? We're at a time in our life where we have to have an organization called Doctors Against Genocide. We have to have an organization called Taxpayers Against Genocide. Why? Because it's happening. That's the world we're in right now. And then while we were there in the Capitol, another doctor a lawyer that's working for another advocacy type organization come up and said, "Oh, Doctors Against Genocide." Like, wow, it's shocking that we even have to have that. Yeah, it is. So my objective that day was to go with them to press lawmakers to support and stand up for House Resolution Block the Bombs, House Resolution to protect healthcare workers in Gaza, and a House resolution to stop the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation immediately and reinstate the United Nations and UNRWA. Why is the United Nations and UNRWA not allowed to go in and service 400 distribution sites and feed people? Well, the reason they were stopped back in March was because all of the food is going to Hamas. Well, since then, it's been over a month now since the United States, through USAID and the State Department, through Israel themselves, Israel's own investigative agencies, Western nations, the UN, UNRWA, have all said there is no evidence that Hamas was stealing all of the food. And yet they still can't go in. Why? Questions that should be asked. Americans need to ask these questions. Demand. And what I will say to every American, does it affect you at home? It sure does. Whether you're Bob and Barbara out in California or Fred and Franny down in South Florida, it affects you. Because when accountability comes, the world's going to look to us. And if you think your blue passport is going to get you anywhere in this world, think again. No one's going to want us. We're going to be a pariah state right along with Israel.
This is true. This is true. These are things that people need to hear. Anthony, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. What do you have coming up? Any appearances you have coming up?
Monday, I'll be in New York City supporting the UN demand for the I'm trying to the United for Palestine, basically a movement within the within the UN that if enough, basically shaping resolutions where if enough countries come together for a certain objective, whether it's in Palestine or in future genocides and future wars, that the that if enough countries come together, they can override the veto, because the United States carries great power in the United Nations that Israel takes advantage of, and that's our veto power. Uniting for Peace is part of the Uniting for Palestine. So Uniting for Peace is the actual proposal within the United Nations for this effort. So I'll be in New York City for that on Monday, and then I'll be doing another panel with the Schiffer Institute, and then further in the week I'll be back in DC with CARE for speaking out against the genocide. And then another engagement with Doctors Against Genocide, and a few more engagements the week after that, and a few more appearances that basically anybody that will allow me to share this, I will talk to. I will share it. And I'm not seeking it out. I'm not seeking attention. These are organizations, and to be clear to everybody, I don't belong to any organization. I'm not affiliated. I'm not aligned to any group or organization or movement. I'm just aligned with the truth. I just want the truth to be known. Values, American values, which I think are the values that I still believe in. Let's not commit genocide. Let's not stand by as human beings. Whether we Palestinians, the Sudanese, Democratic Republic of the Congo, wherever it may be. Genocide? Really? In this day and age, I thought there were some things that were beneath us.
That's right. Anthony, people are asking, is there any way that they can help your efforts? How can people help you?
Stand up against the baloney. Stand up against the complete bull. When the GHF and others say, oh, you can't trust him, The reason they want you to not trust me is because I was there. I saw it. Every reporter in Gaza that has a story to tell has been murdered. In fact, Mohammed Salama from the Middle Eastern Eye, who had been working on the story to confirm the story of the young boy on site number 3 that had been killed. UG Solutions personnel. This was reported in the Middle Eastern Eye. Go look it up. This was already open source reporting. UG Solutions personnel detained this reporter's source and interrogated him at a distribution site, demanding to know where Mohammed Salama was. And the next day, you know what happened to him? Double tap, Nasser Hospital. He was the reporter standing on the balcony when the IDF fired a tank round and then a Hellfire missile to say it was a Hamas camera. It was a human being. It was a reporter. And that reporter was working on telling the truth. And they took him out. So to anyone out there, what you can do to support me, I don't need your clicks or your follows. I don't need your money. I don't need your patting me on the back. I'm not brave. I am not brave. I am not brave nor courageous. I'm not. I'm simply trying to tell what the truth is and for people to see it. Believe what you want. But at the end of the day, don't turn your face and say that you didn't know. You know. So what I need, what would help, continue to spread the message. Push back against what you know are lies. If you see it on Fox News, come on now.
That's right. All right. Anthony, thank you. Thank you so much for your time and good luck. And please be safe. Please be safe.
Thank you. And thank you for your voice. And thank you for your platform. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for continuing to speak out for the truth. You know, I believe your platform and you, it's the truth. The truth should not be controversial.
You're right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Anthony Aguilar. You probably, if you haven't seen him before, first time on this show, he has been on other shows as well. Again, guys, you got to keep spreading that message. And I know it's tough, and I know there are times that we just become very frustrated, right? But I think they want us to give up, right? Like Israel, they want us to give up. They want us to go back to sleep. They want us to go back to brunch. And I think they thought that would happen, and that hasn't happened. And I think that is frustrating them. But thank you so much to Anthony. Tonight's theme is Truth Hurts. Speaking of the truth hurts. Let's go to some of the comments, ladies and gents, and then we'll move on to the next story. Thank you so much for the super sticker, Clarissa Palmore. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Warrior, for the super chat. If the Vatican wanted to stop the genocide, they not only could, they would. That's an interesting point. Thank you for the super sticker, Micah. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Bible doesn't say Israel is entitled to our weapons. Good point, Roger. And thank you, Kenman. Aguilar is the real Rambo. All right. Thank you, Kenman. And let's get the comment on Rockfin. All right. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Overriding U.S. veto is the new route TAG is taking. TAG is Taxpayers Against Genocide, for those who are not aware. Lawyers advise that route instead of pursuing the Leahy Act, implying our judicial branch is in the tank for Israel. There you go. There you go. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't had a chance to do so, could you smash that like button for me? Thank you. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share, just like a Care Bear. And we are moving on to the next story, folks. We are pivoting to domestic policy. Hey. We'll come back to foreign policy. We'll come back. You know, after the 2024 presidential election, you do expect losers and winners to talk about it at least for the next couple of months. I don't really expect it to go on as long as it has, though. And what is now happening is that Kamala Harris, you know, she has this book tour that she is embarking on. She has now sat down and had an interview where she is revealing that Joe Biden is to blame. Now, don't get me wrong. Of course, she says some nice things in the book about Joe Biden as well. I mean, she ain't crazy, but she does point her finger at Joe Biden. And I want you to hear what she said. We're going to get into this clip here from Morning Joe on MSNBC. And I want to get you guys' like opinion about this. I mean, I have my opinion. My whole thing is that I don't know. In my mind, it's almost as if Kamala Harris forgets that she didn't run for president in 2020 in the Democrat primary. Was Biden to blame for that too? She didn't get a delegate. Was that Biden's fault too? Like, it just, she was never a strong candidate. And I said that in 2020 and I said it in 2024. But what I think this is really about is the fact that things did not go as planned. Remember when Joe Biden won the presidency, the plan was, let me make it clear. The plan was that he would serve one term and then basically hand it over to Kamala or whoever was going to be his VP for the second term. That was supposed to be the plan. Biden got in there and decided he didn't want to do that. He said, I wanted to hold on to my seat. I want to hold on, right? So things did not go according to plan. If things would have went according to plan, the way that the Democratic Party would get the first female president, it was going to be done that way, where she would be a vice president and the president would hand it over to her and she would be president for that second term. Since they figured it didn't work with Hillary in 2016 when doing it that way, they figured, hey, this is the best way. And she was already chosen. When I say chosen, she was chosen by the establishment. She was chosen by the Clintons early on for the Senate before she even ran for president. So they pick out the people that they want, and those are supposed to be their stars. And basically, if all the stars line up, things will go their way, and that person will become president of the United States. The stars did line up for Barack Obama. But I would say it is because of Barack Obama's presidencies that the stars did not line up for the Democratic Party that way going forward. And now Kamala is upset. She has said some things and people are talking about it. Let's get into it.
Joe Biden and Jill Biden now. Speaking of...
Sorry, let me start from the beginning here so you can see what she said. Let me just go back here. Here we go.
The Atlantic has published an excerpt from former Vice President Kamala Harris's forthcoming new book entitled 107 Days. And in it, Harris details the challenges she faced when Joe Biden dropped out of the race and she was suddenly tapped to run for president. In it, she writes, during all those months of growing panic, should I have told Joe to consider not running? Perhaps. It's Joe and Jill's decision. We all said that like a mantra, as if we'd all been hypnotized. Was it grace or was it recklessness? In retrospect, I think it was recklessness. The stakes were simply too high. This wasn't a choice that should have been left to an individual's ego, an individual's ambition. It should have been more than a personal decision.
Everybody just marinate with that for a second. Sit on that. Let that marinate. Okay. So basically what Kamala Harris is saying here is that it really shouldn't have been up to Joe Biden for him to decide whether or not he was going to stay in this race, that others should have intervened and said, no, that's it. You do your one term and then you're going to just pass the baton to her. Another thing I want to mention here as well. Don't forget, there was no primary. They just gave her the nomination. We can't forget also that Barack Obama made it pretty clear that he didn't think that Kamala could win, and that's why he didn't want her to be the nominee. He was pointing towards Wes Moore, who's governor of Maryland, or Gretchen Whitmer, who is the governor of Michigan. He was pointing towards those two. I also think they would have lost, like just to be honest. But they just picked her and made her the nominee, even though there were people that were running against Joe Biden. They didn't want to entertain having an actual primary because they knew she wouldn't win in the primary. You see how this goes? They were just kind of just giving it to her. Let me just give you this. A surprise. So she is saying that Joe Biden had an ego, and that it was his ego that kept him in the race. We can say that Biden had an ego. We had plenty of complaints about Joe Biden, but the way that Kamala talks about it, it almost sounds as though she feels like it was owed to her. And that's the way, like, they talk about it too. You'll see what they're going to say here. The way that the media talks about this is almost as if it was owed to Kamala Harris, that she shouldn't have to work for it. Let's just give it to her just because she checks off these boxes. Let's continue.
I was well aware of my delicate status. Lore has it that every outgoing chief of staff always tells the incoming president's chief of staff, rule number 1, watch the VP. I often learned that the president's staff was adding fuel to negative narratives that sprang up around me. When the stories were unfair or inaccurate, the president's inner circle seemed fine with it. Indeed, it seemed as if they decided I should be knocked down a little bit more.
In other words, let me just put this in, clear terms for everybody. In other words, they didn't like her ass. Okay, let's just call it that. Just put all that jargon aside. We don't need no long story. We don't need a paragraph. Long story short, they didn't like Kamala Harris. And this is not new. This is not something that we haven't heard before, where people felt like Kamala Harris was not a likable person. People who worked for her had said that she was not a likable person. They didn't like you. That's it. Again, it's almost as if she feels as though they were supposed to, that it was owed to her. Not everybody. Here's the thing. Newsflash, ladies and gents. Not everybody's going to like you. That's just life. Blow it off and move on. Okay? That's just it. It just is what it is. They didn't like her.
Their thinking was zero sum. If she's shining, he's dimmed. None of them grasped that if I did well, he did well. That given the concerns about his age, my visible success as his vice president was vital. It would serve as a testament to his judgment in choosing me and reassurance that if something happened, the country was in good hands.
I just want to remind everybody that Joe Biden didn't even want to pick Kamala Harris in the first damn place. Joe Biden wanted to choose Amy Klobuchar. From what I understand, Dem leadership, Dem establishment, and donors pushed Kamala Harris on him. He didn't want her. It's kind of like, and I don't know if anyone has ever been in this situation, but some of you probably have. It is kind of like the guy who, if he has to choose between two girls, he has like his first pick, and then he kind of has like his backup pick. And the first pick is no longer an option, so he goes with the backup pick. You were the backup. That's just a reality. So going into that situation, she wasn't the first choice. Truth hurts.
Well,
That is from Kamala Harris's new book.
yeah.
But
I was just to say, so Willie or who wants to take the jump ball here? Rev, I'll go to you. So politics. I mean, you've run for president. A couple of things here. I can understand everybody wringing their hands saying, why didn't we step in? Why didn't we intervene? I can understand the Vice President Harris doing that. But people that know Joe Biden and Jill Biden know, speaking of jump balls, nobody was going to take that ball from their hands. They were determined. I mean, I talk to a lot of people. I do a lot of people around the Bidens, and the further you get away from it, the further you realize that Joe Biden and Jill Biden were not going to be talked out of anything until the pressure was overwhelming. That's number one. Number two, vice presidents are treated badly by the president's staff. Ask Joe Biden. There were times he was treated absolutely horrifically by Barack Obama's staff. Just no respect. And sadly, that happened. So people that may be saying, oh, well, Kamala Harris is bitter. This unfortunately is a dynamic that happens in every White House.
there's a whole show about it
No, there's no doubt about it. One of the reasons I wanted to take the jump ball on this is I remember at the beginning, I was among those saying to Biden when he won the nomination, we want to see a black woman on the ticket. Right. He had already committed a black woman in the Supreme Court, which he did. Right. But our argument was, well, suppose you don't get elected. We want to see one on the ticket.
Pause. That is going to rest my case with that part, ladies and gentlemen. That rests my case. Do you hear what Al Sharpton just said? He told Joe Biden, we want to see a black woman with you on the ticket. Who the hell are you, Al? Like, who just walks up to the presidential, nominee and says, we want to see a black woman with you on the ticket? Who are you? So now you got not just dim leadership, not just the donor class, but you also have the media making decisions. We want to see this. Why? Just any black woman? Is that what we just do? Just pick any black woman? I don't know. Not someone who's not qualified. Like, I don't know. Just pick any black woman because that's what we want to see. Oh my God. I'm telling you guys, this is how they end up in this situation.
And to our surprise, he chose Kamala Harris, who had debated him pretty viciously, right? According to some feeling during the thing. He suggested he was racist. That's correct.
Busing. Good on the debate
and to
stage.
his credit, he felt she was the best candidate. Yeah. So she came in to a staff that already was saying, why did he pick her? Mm-hmm. She ambushed us. So she was not in a position to really counsel that you ought to step aside when they never really, the staff, acclimated to her. And I think that anyone that got to know President Biden as I did, know that it was him and Jill that were going to make the final decision. Right. So here's somebody that already was sort of in the midway house that was going to jump over the staff and go. I think that she was in a very peculiar position. Though the public would say, why didn't you say something? I don't think she was in a position. No, she just wasn't. Think at the end, I don't think she was reckless. Well, I think she did what she could do.
And by the way, Joe Biden weren't listening. They weren't going to. If she went in, she could go in and say it all the time. They weren't listening. I will say, John, as we talk about Kamala Harris, there's also just.
Let me just pause here for a second. You guys weren't listening either, because Joe and Mika were running cover for Joe Biden for a long time, a long time. Even when they knew that Joe Biden was not competent, they came onto that show and told you that he was. They lied straight to the viewers' faces to let them think Joe Biden still got it. He's good to go. We will always back and support Joe Biden. And it wasn't until after that awful debate when they got the green light that it was okay to criticize him now so that they could push in Kamala. Then they said, yeah, we love Joe Biden. Let me say how he does it. We just love Joe Biden. I don't know. His voice is weird, but just love Joe Biden. They said they loved him so much, but they were like, it may be time for him to pass on the baton. But they ran cover for him for a long time.
The truth too. Early on, she did herself no favors. I mean, she had a terrible time with her staff the first year or two. It was the White House was having to do triage on her staffing problems. Everybody leaving. So she had a rocky start, but she certainly leveled out and started doing, I think, very well.
Because they did not like her because she was not good to work for. That has been the rumor mill for a long time, that she is not a nice person to work for.
And stepped up during the campaign in an unbelievable way.
By the way, that's the thing that's always forgotten. She was like, I remember calling her one time going, I wasn't sure. You're up on stage. You look like Evita, when she was going to like 15,000 people events and they're all screaming and going crazy. And I was like, never saw that coming.
Yeah, she found her voice in the vice presidency. People around Biden even grudgingly admit that around when the Dobbs decision came down, that's when she really stepped up. Right. And then ran as good of a campaign as she could have. Most people believe in those 107 days. Yeah.
With Trump?
No, she didn't run as good of a campaign as she could have. This whole thing is an effort to rehabilitate Kamala Harris's reputation. This book tour that she's going, and like I said, they all write a book. Right? Hillary wrote one, etc. but this is to rehabilitate Kamala Harris's reputation. That's really what this is, because things didn't work out the way that they wanted it to. The media gaslit American voters into believing that Kamala was doing way better than she actually was. Her own campaign team admitted that after she lost, that they didn't understand why the media was showing these polls that she was doing so well, because all the polls that they saw internally showed that was never the case. So you guys led people on with this lie, which is why your ratings tanked after that. All of them did, except for Fox News. Of course, Fox News wasn't saying she was doing well, but you guys misled the voters. The voters were disappointed when she lost the way that she lost. And then we're like, whoa, maybe we shouldn't listen to you guys, etc. And then on top of that, she wasn't a strong candidate. No, she didn't have the full time to run like the other candidates did, but she also wasn't a strong candidate. She never separated herself from Joe Biden. I think that was one of the biggest mistakes. One of the ways that she could have done that was by taking a different position on Gaza, saying you're going to withhold the arms, saying you're going to withhold the money to Israel. But she wasn't willing to do that. And hold on to that piece, because there's something she said about that in the book as well. Hold on to it.
God. And had a strong debate performance. She also writes in the book, certainly there's, as Mika just read, questions there about Biden's decision to run, but she also addresses the other part, like, did she think he was capable of holding the office? And she says this: Joe Biden was a smart guy with long experience and deep conviction. On his worst day, he was more deeply knowledgeable, more capable of exercising judgment, and far more compassionate than Donald Trump on his best. But she does say, but at age 81, Joe got tired. I don't believe it was incapacity. If I believe that, I would have said so. Mm-hmm. As loyal as I am to President Biden, I am more loyal to my country.
Mike,
he started to lose his mind too. It's not just Joe got tired. He also started to lose his mind. I want to show you what she said in that book about Gaza. And that'll save you time or money if you wanted to buy the book, because I ain't buying that damn book. But if you look on social media, you can see some of the text here. Bree shared this. She said, I'm sorry if Biden was actively sabotaging your campaign and you still chose not to break from him. That makes you look worse, not better, especially given the stakes were not just an election, but a genocide. So let me show you. She's responding to this tweet here. Some of the things that were highlighted. Listen to this. Worse, I often learned that the president's staff was adding fuel to negative narratives that sprang up around me. One narrative that took a stubborn hold was that I had a chaotic office and unusually high staff turnover during my first year. Again, like I said, they said she was not easy to work with. Let's get to the Gaza part here. Joe was already polling badly on the age issue, with roughly 75% of voters saying he was too old to be an effective president. Then he started taking on water for his perceived blank check to Benjamin Netanyahu in Gaza. So look at how she worded this, right? Or she probably has a ghostwriter that helps her with the stuff. Perceived blank check. So even the way she's talking about it is like, oh, this is just something people thought, but, it wasn't actually true. No, it was true. When the polls indicated that I was getting more popular, the people around him didn't like the contrast that was emerging. Let's go on here. We get to the crisis in Gaza. Desperate people had been shot when they swarmed a food truck, and I spoke of families reduced to eating leaves or animal feed, women prematurely giving birth with little or no medical care, and children dying from malnutrition and dehydration. I reiterated my strong support for Israel's security and called on Hamas to release the hostages and accept the ceasefire agreement then on the table. So again, not distinguishing yourself from Biden, right? Like she's not separating herself from Biden. I also called on Israel for greater access to aid. It was a speech that had been vetted and approved by the White House and the National Security Council. It went viral and the West Wing was displeased. I was castigated for apparently delivering it too well. So here's the thing. This part here about calling for greater access to aid. Biden said that too. This is what I was saying about her not distancing herself from Joe Biden. But the point she's saying here is that the West Wing wasn't happy because she delivered the speech too well. Their thinking was zero sum. If she's shining, then he's dimmed. None of them grasped that if I did it well, he did well. So, and you saw that other part there. So here's the part here. Since she mentioned Gaza, right? Part of the reason why Kamala Harris did not win is because she lost the youth vote. And part of the reason she lost the youth vote was because of Gaza. It's hard to even think of an explanation other than the economy. That's a big one. But I mean, you can't even say, because remember, they came together and they said, okay, we're going to erase some of the student loan debt for people, which would greatly benefit like the youth vote. But the Gaza thing is what turned a lot of them away. Kamala Harris had one job. All she had to do was distance herself from Joe Biden. But what this shows you, and what this is not the win that Kamala thinks it is. I think she thinks this is a win writing this in this book. No, what this shows you is that Kamala Harris wasn't willing to stand on her own 2 feet. It shows you that the moment that Kamala Harris got pressure, she backed down. That's who you want to be as a president. The moment she got pressured from the West Wing, she decided to back down. She was more concerned about what they thought and how they felt about all this. So this is what I was talking about. You have choices, right? The truth hurts. They can be upset with you. They can be displeased. So what? This is one thing I will say about Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't care. He doesn't care if certain people in his administration get upset with him. Now, Israel, that's a whole other story. But you had a choice and you chose to do what was going to please the West Wing because they were mad at you. So what? And I don't know whoever was advising Kamala Harris, but she obviously did not have good advisors. These are the kind of things, ladies and gentlemen, that we have to start talking about. And especially for women who are watching, if you're a woman and you're watching this, one of the things I'm going to tell you is this. Whenever you work in a position and let's say there may not be as many women there, right? But and the men are in leadership or whatever. I'm going to tell you a little secret, something that I learned a long time ago. The moment that they express disappointment with you and you buckle, they got you. If Kamala Harris would have pushed back and said, I am the right person for this time, Joe, you've had your time, I'm the right person. If she would have stood up for herself, they would have had more respect for her. But the moment that she goes, oh, well, they got mad at me. Oh, no, that type of thing. The moment she went onto The View and she was questioned, would you do anything differently than Biden? And she said, no, I wouldn't, because they told her, remember, no daylight, kid, no difference, no difference. That's what they told you, but that doesn't mean you had to do it. And I say this, and this is a message to send out to the younger people who may be entering the workforce, because this is a little trick that you learn along the way. They're not going to tell you this up front. There are going to be times in the work environment where you're going to be faced with this. Okay, they told me this is what they want me to do. But do you have to do it? Kamala Harris wasn't going to be, they were going to kick her to the side as VP if she didn't listen to them. You see what I mean? At that point in the game, they weren't going to do that. Obviously, that would also cause some issues. So they weren't going to just say, okay, you're not going to be vice president anymore. They weren't going to do that. So you have to ask yourself this question. Do you have to do it? And the answer is, regardless of what they wanted you to say, when she got on that stage on The View and they said, would you do anything differently from Biden? If she felt that she would have, which she now apparently is saying she would have, then that's what she should have said. I don't give a damn what they tell you. They advise you to say. People break script all the time. It's called ad-libbing. So they are trying to rehabilitate Kamala Harris because this loss is different from the Hillary Clinton loss. And I'm going to tell you why. Hillary Clinton's loss was different because Hillary was still able to win a swing state. That's the reality. Hillary Clinton's loss was different because Hillary Clinton won the popular vote and lost the Electoral College. But the Kamala loss is a whole other different thing. She didn't win any swing states, and she did not win the popular vote. So the Dems lost the popular vote for the first time in a long time. It's an embarrassment for the Democratic Party. So their goal now is to try to find a way. How can we get people to understand she's this great person and the person for the moment and da-da-da. And Kamala Harris is probably embarrassed too. So you just keep that in mind because she does have dates scheduled for this book tour. I just want you guys to remember all this when you start to see these clips and everything of her on this book tour. Okay? This is a rehabilitation tour. That's what this is really all about. Just like when Hillary Clinton sat there and she read her book and she said, I remember that little girl who wanted to just be president one day. I wanted to be the first female president of the United States. And then she started like crying and all that shit. That's what this is about. Okay. Biden was an asshole. Don't get me wrong. But for Kamala to pretend that she did everything right, for Morning Joe to pretend that she did everything right is disingenuous. And you shouldn't fall for that. Truth hurts. Let's go to some of the comments, ladies and gents. Nene said, who the hell will buy this book? You'd be surprised. You would be surprised. I think we gave the member shout outs. Yeah. Thank you, OJ. Keep spreading the truth, ma'am. You are welcome. Let's give a shout out to Mario, who just became a Sabby member. What's up, Mario? Do 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 do. Thank you, OJ, for this super chat. She spent $1 billion of taxpayer money to campaign. LOL. Thank you, Pine. I hope Kamala runs as VP under Hillary for 2028. A Hillary Kamala ticket is my dream. Just kidding. Thank you, Roger. The jump off, the side chick. You guys are a trip. Arcane said exactly, Sabby. Kamala was a 5th round draft pick playing on the starting line. Hey, hey, hey. Thank you, OJ. She used to be a side piece. LOL. Ask Montel Jordan and former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown. Thank you, Kenman. Al Sharpton equals race hustler. Al Sharpton is a trip. Thank you, Warrior. When will people realize it's not a red and blue thing? It's the rich versus the rest of us. And thank you, Salt and Pepper. Did he compare her to Evita? Kamala is no Eva Peron. If she was, she would have won. He did, man. These comparisons crack me up. If you haven't done so, ladies and gents, can you do me a favor and smash that like button? Thank you. All right, we are moving on to the next story. This one is pretty interesting. Brian, shout out to Brian Berlatek, who was so gracious to join me earlier this morning because I said, I really need to talk to Brian about Nepal. We need to talk about the protests in Nepal. And I think some people are getting these protests wrong. They're seeing it and they're saying the younger people are fighting back against the politicians. But once you look into this a little bit deeper, you start to see this is a color revolution that is happening in Nepal. And so shout out to Brian Berletic, who came on this morning to discuss this with me. I want to go ahead and play this because he breaks this down so well. The truth hurts, ladies and gentlemen. The truth hurts. Listen to what Brian said about this. Okay, here we go. Yeah, listen to what Brian said about the protests in Nepal and how the U.S. government is behind this. Are we looking to another type of regime change? That's what it seems like, folks. These protests are not what you think they are. And he's also going to tell you something about the Indonesia protests, which I goofed on, which also appears to be a color revolution. Let's go ahead and bring it in here, and I'll just get my little self out of the way. Here before, Brian is based in Eurasia. He is here to discuss what is happening in Nepal. So Brian, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me back.
So I think a big question around all of this, a lot of us, we are seeing these videos coming out of Nepal. The parliament was set on fire. There are a number of people out in the streets protesting. It appears that from what I understand, even the prime minister has been trying to leave the country or flee the country. The corporate media, the Western corporate media here is saying that the students decided, or the Gen Z population in Nepal decided to rise up because Nepal has a ban on social media, or a banned social media. Some are saying that this is an actual color revolution that is taking place in Nepal. What exactly is happening?
Well, it is most certainly a U.S. engineered color revolution. All of the organizations the U.S. uses to do this everywhere else are involved, and there is evidence for this. The organization that organized the initial protests, Hami Nepal, on its own website, if you just go to its website, they have U.S. corporations like Coca-Cola as sponsors and partners, and they also list U.S. National Endowment for Democracy funded anti-China organizations as partners as well. And if you're familiar with this process and the organizations the U.S. uses to carry this out, this website is just full of all of the common Western style democracy slogans and ideas and concepts, all of these very optimistic sounding but extremely impractical things the U.S. actually exploits, sells to the population of a targeted country, to get them out into the streets angry, and then to do this to their country, which is essentially just burn it to the ground with no real plan afterwards, except for whatever the U.S. tells them to do next, whichever politicians or political circles they decide to try to install into power. All of the other telltale signs are the fake human rights organizations, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International. These are, again, funded by Western governments and Western corporate-funded foundations. And these are organizations that during times like this, they will talk about the police and the military, how violent and brutal they are, and then they will ignore video circulating where the protesters are armed with weapons, war weapons, essentially. And so this is the lopsided, very dishonest, very deceptive coverage and human rights advocacy and democracy promotion that we have seen in so many places. And what people have to understand, no matter how bad a targeted government is, a government does not have to be good for the U.S. to want to overthrow it. A government might even have cooperated with the U.S. in the past. It could even have been installed into power by the U.S. itself in a previous color revolution. But if they are being disobedient about something important the U.S. needs to move forward in that country now, they will use these tactics to remove them and replace them with someone far worse. However bad the government in Nepal might have been, the people they will replace them with will be even worse, and they will say yes to the one thing this government, no matter how bad it was, said no to. So this is the overview for what is happening in Nepal.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are getting this wrong because of what Western media is saying. You mentioned Amnesty International. I think it's important for people to note that while they may get some things right, that doesn't mean they get everything right, right? So I think it's important that you mentioned that that is a Western puppet, so to speak. What exactly does a color revolution mean for those who may not be aware?
But this is the process in which the U.S., which already spends millions of dollars in countries all around the world to build up opposition groups inside countries. Opposition groups, media platforms, human rights organizations, legal organizations that provide U.S.-funded free legal aid to all the agitators the U.S. encourages to go into the streets, breaking the law, challenging the government, committing sedition. They build up what is essentially a parallel system inside a targeted country that already has a government and institutions. They're building up parallel institutions. And once it reaches critical mass, they will trigger a color revolution to either destabilize or topple the targeted government, and then they try to install this parallel system on top of the indigenous institutions, political parties, governments, and anything else that it had existed prior to that. This is what they have done to Ukraine. So they took a nation in Eastern Europe that was enjoying the best of both worlds. It was cooperating with Europe. It was cooperating with Russia. The population had, at least in the East, strong, affinity for Russia. There was relative stability. It wasn't great, but we see what the result of the U.S. engineered color revolution in 2014 was. Not only did they remove the government, but they took control over the information space. They purged all opposition political parties to their client regime installed into Kiev. And then they have transformed over the last several years the Ukrainian population into extremists, extremely rabidly anti-Russian. There are literal Nazis running around inside Ukraine that have entire units inside the Ukrainian armed forces. So this is what they do. They don't just install this on top of whatever was there before in the government. They also erase its culture, its politics, everything that made it that country. They erase it. They're installing something on top of it and erasing everything in the process. And it's very hard to stop, and it's even harder to reverse once it's successful.
They create these organizations in other countries to create unrest in those countries, to cause chaos where there may not have been before.
Absolutely. And the number one priority is to find socioeconomic, ethnic, religious fault lines inside a targeted country. Maybe they already exist. Maybe they don't exist at all. The U.S. will manufacture them, and then they start trying to widen them. And the goal is always to pit one group against the other. And often when you see these color revolutions, they're waving some artificial flag that was created by the CIA, by the NED. They're using different kinds of marketing gimmicks kind of brand the color revolution. It's often never the actual colors or flag of the country that's being dismembered. And the whole purpose of this, again, is to create two separate groups inside of a country, pit them up against each other, and destroy everything. This is what empire has done all throughout human history, divide and conquer. This is just the modern iteration of this.
Why would what interest would the U.S. government have in Nepal? Does it has anything to do with its physical location?
This is something else people make a lot of mistakes about. They say, look, Nepal's in the middle of the mountains. It's landlocked. There's 30 million people just living in the mountains. There's nothing there. What do they want from Nepal? But you have to look at it from a big picture perspective. The entire planet and all of the nations on it, the U.S. wants primacy over all of them. And the only way a nation like the United States, which represents a tiny percentage of the global population, the only way they could achieve that is by creating instability absolutely everywhere. If every nation is allowed to develop, create peace and stability, and thus prosperity, the U.S. has no ability to project primacy over the entire planet. So every single nation has to be destabilized, pitted against itself, divided and conquered, including nations like Nepal. Also, if you look at it on a map, it is right between India and China. It's no secret the U.S. wants to cause harm to China, and destabilizing a country right on China's border is going to just create another headache for the government in Beijing. Of course, India has also been very disobedient to the United States lately, refusing to cut off its purchases of Russian oil. It's also becoming closer to China, and so this is a way of punishing India for that. And the U.S. punishing India has already been ongoing. In Bangladesh, that was another example of the U.S. toppling a government that was stable and working together with India, and then they have overthrown it and destabilized Bangladesh again, right along India's periphery. So it's a 2-for-1 really. You're hurting India and China. And one thing people might not be aware of is the fact that China saw how isolated Nepal was, and for several years now they've been developing plans and are actually working on connecting Nepal to all of China by rail. And that would have completely transformed the country. And of course, this is something the US will definitely want to stop. Now, here in Thailand, where I am based, there is already a high-speed rail link being built between Thailand and China. It will run through Laos, the country of Laos, to the north of Thailand. It's already under construction, and the US-backed opposition here has been very vocal trying to stop that. So this is a real thing the US does, and it is a real thing the US will use color revolutions even to try to stop. This Belt and Road Initiative physically binds these countries together, and once it happens, it will be very hard to undo. So this is why the US is interested in investing so much in making this happen. And of course, they don't care about any of the death and destruction and instability they cause in the process.
This is why it's important, I think, for people to look at the bigger picture, especially when we're talking about a lot of, geopolitics. It's really interesting. The US government, instead of focusing on how they can improve infrastructure and the economy here in the United States, they choose to spend their time trying to destroy other countries that have found a way to improve their infrastructure and their economy for their people. I think that's one of the reasons why the US government heavily targets China the way that they do. And I just look at it like this is if we're talking about competition, instead of trying to topple China, why don't you try to actually be a competitor? And I don't know, like try to improve the infrastructure here, like try to improve the economy here, make life better for people in the United States instead of going after all these other countries. This is kind of the way that I see it.
Well, why not even cooperate with China? I mean, there is no compelling reason for the U.S. not just compete constructively with China, but to also cooperate with China. What reason? And the reason is very simple. Again, the U.S. and this is stated U.S. policy. It's in all of the corporate funded think tank papers. And it's also in government papers describing their official position. The U.S. is the sole global superpower. It exercises global leadership, which is a euphemism for primacy, and it wants to maintain that. And it sees China as undermining that primacy. It insists on forcing itself on the rest of the world rather than working together with it and respecting the national sovereignty of all other nations, the way it demands other nations to respect American sovereignty within its own borders. And so that is the reason they cannot cooperate with China. There is no threat from China. It does not seek to subvert the United States. It has openly and repeatedly tried to work with the US. Even now, despite everything the US has done to China, it still continues to try to cooperate with the United States rather than devolve into the zero-sum, winner-takes-all clash the United States is trying to engineer.
Yeah, and something else that was pretty interesting that I saw, speaking of the United States and Nepal, I don't know if a lot of people have seen this, but this picture is recirculating again. Victoria Nuland. So she's one. Here's a picture of her here. It says U.S. under Secretary Victoria Nuland on state visit to Nepal. She visited Nepal in 2023. And what we have kind of learned is that wherever this woman goes, just watch out, right? Like she's not there for good reasons. But it makes me wonder, what was that conversation that she had in 2023? But as you can see, again, this is the U.S. Kind of pushing their way in or onto another country instead of letting people just do their own thing in these countries. But yeah, 2023, Victoria Nuland was there.
Yes, and USAID before it was kind of hidden away. It has not been dismantled. It has just been integrated into the State Department, and now there is zero transparency as to whatever part of it exists is doing. The National Endowment for Democracy, a lot of people, for whatever, I don't know why they think this, they think it was defunded and dismantled. Its website is still up, it's still active, and it is still funding sedition worldwide, including in Nepal. And you can download a PDF of all the programs that it's funding across Asia, and you will see Nepal there, and you will see the programs that it is funding, including, youth movements. And so, why do you think all of these youths are coming? Do people honestly believe they just spontaneously organized this riot that just so quickly overthrew the government, including armed elements using war weapons? Is that what they honestly think? And when we see these protests developing, people always ask, is this a US color revolution? It's very simple to figure it out. Figure out what organizations are involved, what organizations are promoting it, and find out who is funding them. That's all it takes to figure this out. There's no mystery. I'm not being passed secret leaked documents. I'm just going onto the internet. I'm looking up who these people are and where their money comes from. And if you see, 9 out of 10 of the organizations either funded directly by the US or through European governments or Western corporate foundations, then it is a color revolution. I have lived through a lot of unrest here in Thailand. In 2009, 2010, these were US-sponsored color revolutions. In 2014, there was a counter-color revolution. So people say, Brian, you think every protest is funded by the US government. No, the one in 2014 was actually funded by special interests inside Thailand who opposed US interference in their internal political affairs. And they were trying to overturn the client regime that the US installed into power. And they actually successfully did that. If you looked at the organizations involved in that protest, you would see there was no US connection at all, no US, European, or Western corporate foundation connections. They were all connected to companies, parties, institutions here in Thailand. So that is how you figure it out. And it's very easy once you start doing that. Too many people try to do analysis by ideology. What are the protesters saying? Oh, that's the same ideology I have. I think I'll support them. No, the US isn't going to overthrow a country under the flag of US imperialism. They're always going to try to find an ideology that resonates with ordinary people. So they're camouflaging the US engineered color revolution as, whatever your own personal political proclivities might be. They might use that to try to push through a color revolution. So you have to follow the funding. You cannot just listen to what people are saying. It doesn't actually matter why they think they're out there. It only matters why they are really out there, what the leadership and the organizations organizing it really are doing with these people. They dupe them into coming out into the streets. They don't even necessarily need to fund them. Just get them emotionally worked up and they will come out. And again, the thing is, they're using real grievances, things that people are upset about, and then they're amplifying it and exaggerating it and really ramping it up and trying to escalate it out of control to achieve regime change.
This makes me wonder about a lot of these uprisings. You said that US aid is still active?
Yes, if people look, it is admitted across the Western media that it was folded into the State Department. So it no longer exists as US aid, but the programs that it was funding around the world, those have been folded into the State Department and they all continue. And the National Endowment for Democracy, which is still active and has not been even hidden, what they did instead was a policy change. If you go to their website, you can see, since President Trump pretended to defund and dismantle it, they have a new policy where they will no longer disclose the names of the organizations they are funding. Before that, it was kind of hit or miss. Maybe 50% of the organizations they were funding, they would actually list the name, which made it easy for people like me trying to expose US-sponsored color revolutions around the world. Well, they realized that too, and they realized people were starting to wake up to it. So they have this new policy, and they say, well, we have to protect the identity of these organizations, because if people know the US government is funding them to promote democracy, they'll get clamped down on and they'll be repressed. Well, they're committing sedition and treason. So yes, they will be targeted, but not because they're promoting democracy, because they are foreign agents funded to divide and destroy their own country. So that is on their website. People should go check that. Although they should go and check and see that the website is still actually up and active, and then reassess what they think they thought the Trump administration was doing with US foreign policy.
This is very interesting. I was not aware of that. So I feel like people have been duped once again. And the other question I have is, so I saw the video footage of helicopters. People were saying that the politicians in Nepal were trying to leave. They were trying to flee. So essentially, this is just another regime change. It seems like the goal of the US government is to get the politicians out of Nepal, or to make the unrest so unbearable that they flee. Like I said, it looked like the parliament building was on fire, and then they can install who they want in the leadership in that country.
Absolutely. Well, the best case scenario is they do install an obedient client regime that will do whatever it tells them, even if it is like as they've done with Ukraine, transform the country into a battering ram and use it against its neighbors, either China or India, or maybe China and India, who knows? And they will be able to use that as leverage against both China and India, especially as we see increasing friction between the US and both of these large Eurasian countries. The other thing that a lot of people don't understand is the US will be more than happy to settle with just a failed state. Because again, the point is they want to exercise hegemony over the entire globe. And the easiest way to do that is to divide and destroy everybody. And then you rule over all the broken pieces and you get to exploit it and do whatever you want, whenever you want. A dysfunctional country cannot defend itself. We saw the US do this to Libya. They didn't install a client regime, a functional government in place of the Libyan government they toppled in 2011. And they've done this to Syria to a great extent. Al-Qaeda is literally running Syria, or at least parts of it, right now. And they, in one way or another, they've done this to Iraq, and it has taken years and years for Iraq to try to rebuild a functioning nation state since the 2003 invasion.
This is very interesting, especially when you mention India as well. India is in an interesting position because India is a part of BRICS. So they're obviously, they have their allyship with Russia. At the same time, India still is backing and supporting Israel. Netanyahu recently gave a thank you towards India about that. It just kind of seems like they want to have their feet in two different places. Like they're trying to play along with the West a little bit, and at the same time trying to play along with BRICS and this idea of a multipolar world. How long do you think that they can withstand that?
I mean, that's a good question. The problem India has, it was a British colony. And if people understand anything about British imperialism, they also divided and conquered entire regions of the planet. And India was one of these places where they had all of these different ethnicities and groups of people, and then also religions. And they created these vast divisions in Indian society and huge amounts of animosity that may already have existed, but they ramped it up. And even to this day, there is still a lot of that playing out. The same goes for Malaysia and Myanmar, also former British colonies. In Singapore, they had really bad race riots after they gained independence, and it took them years to try to create the sort of harmony you see in functioning nations that were not colonized, or at least fully colonized by the British or French during that period of time. And so that is one huge problem India has. The other problem is they have Western-style democracy, which, as we know, is not actually a system of self-determination. It is a system of control. You have all of these parties. The US is able to influence in one way or another through lobbying, through funding, through NED money, through all kinds of programs and partnerships. And they're able to divide these political parties against one another, have them fighting for power. And when you have this type of division, there is not the unity you need to actually build the country up and solve the country's problems. And India is a huge country. It's the largest population in the world. It was between India and China, over 1 billion people each. And they need to have a tremendous amount of unity and vision to try to raise this country up in the same way China has risen itself up. And why was China able to do that? Because of national unity. Between all of the ethnic groups and religions that make up China, people just imagine everyone in China is the same. No, there are a huge number of ethnicities and religions in China, and their top priority is harmony. And they don't have Western-style democracy where these politicians are fighting over national power and trying to gain votes from people around. They're able to have one central government that has one vision, and they're able to pursue that and implement it. And we can see the result. You look at India and China, two countries of a very similar sized population, a similar amount of resources and potential, but it was China that was able to reach that full potential before India. And I believe that India can eventually, but they're going to have to throw off all of the baggage that Western imperialism placed on it, including after their independence and this Western-style democracy that has created so much dysfunction ever since.
This is really interesting because I'm starting to wonder how much of this has anything to do with Islam. Like, do you ever wonder if the US is targeting, because Islam is the largest religion in the world. Do you ever wonder if the US is purposefully targeting these countries that seem to have a significant Muslim population?
Well, they'll definitely use that. They'll use any sort of religious differences inside of a country. They've tried that here in Thailand, and thankfully it has not worked. They did it in neighboring Myanmar, and it worked very well. And they had people killing each other in the streets for years and years. And there is deadly violence still taking place. There's basically a U.S.-backed insurrection taking place in Myanmar, a war essentially. And in Thailand, the largest religious minority is Islam, and there's a large number of Muslims living in Thailand. The largest population of Muslims in Thailand are in central Thailand, around Bangkok, the capital. There's a much smaller number in the deep south, and there's a separatist movement there. So you see, the U.S. went in there, they radicalized these groups, and they're causing political violence down there. And they wanted to try to create a Buddhist Islam divide across the entire country. But the government was able to, the military and the monarchy essentially were able to stop that from happening, stop that from repeating as it had in Myanmar. And in India, yes, so they definitely use the caste system, religions, ethnicities. They use all of this to try to divide and cause dysfunction, because that is how you maintain control over, especially a country as large as India, with the potential power that India could have. Even though the U.S. pretends they're a partner or an ally, they do not want to see India rise to become a strong, independent nation.
Yeah, it's making me wonder some things now, because now I'm looking back at the protest in Indonesia, which I talked about recently, and now I'm starting to wonder. Like now, like at first when I was reading about it and watching the videos, it was just described as a class war. And I was like, well, that's something we all can kind of learn, from like here in the West. And now I'm starting to wonder, how do we know, whether or not that wasn't something that was, that unrest wasn't created.
That was a US public. Yes, and they have tried to use, they've used a multitude of gimmicks here. And I'm not trying to trivialize class, that there is a real class struggle, but when it's US funded, it's obviously not genuine at all. They're just using the language and the themes of it to draw people in, and then they're exploiting that and actually hurting their best interests, not fighting for them. And so yes, it was, and if you look at the protests in Indonesia and in Nepal, they're literally using the same symbols. They have this Japanese anime series called One Piece, and there's this pirate flag that they were flying in both places. And they're so lazy, the CIA and NED, they do this all the time. They did a movement in Serbia called OPAR, and they had like the clenched fist symbol, and then they reused that across a whole bunch of other color revolutions at the time. And they tried to lump them all together, I guess, to save money on printing. So I don't know. I honestly, I don't know. But they were using literally the same signs. And again, if you follow the money, the media organizations marshaling people and getting them out into the streets are all funded by the National Endowment for Democracy. And I knew this because there was actually an article in a Western-funded publication where they interviewed these fake NGOs and media organizations, and they were complaining because there was a suspension of NED funding at the beginning of the Trump administration, and they were complaining about, if we don't get this U.S. money, we can't function. And now these are the ones involved in promoting the protests in Indonesia. And if you just think about it, Indonesia just joined BRICS, and the president was supposed to be in China for the SCO meeting. And so they just tried to burn the whole country down. You're not allowed to join BRICS, and you're not allowed to go work together with China. We're trying to get your country and use it as a battering ram against China. You're not supposed to work with them. And if you go through these media organizations supporting the protests, you will see other articles about, oh, this project with China building high-speed rail across Indonesia, building modern infrastructure the country desperately needs. What a waste of money. And then, of course, they could use class as a way of making ordinary people angry at the government. Look at all this money they're spending. They could be giving it to us, when in reality, infrastructure is a way of giving it to the public and creating prosperity for everybody.
Definitely something that I need to pay closer attention to. They got me on that one. They got me on the Indonesia one. And all these things happening at the same time is something else I've noticed as well. Right. Like, and then they're trying to start a war with Venezuela. Like, it's ridiculous. I don't think I've ever seen it this crazy, where there's all these different, like, intelligence has its hands in so many different places at once at the same time. Meanwhile, the United States is crumbling. It's a crumbling, dying empire. It's crazy.
Yes, absolutely. The last time I saw it this bad was probably around the Arab Spring. And again, the most important thing to do is when you see these protests erupt, you have to figure out, if you cannot find the specific leader, if the Western media isn't even telling you who they are, or if the Western media seems sympathetic to them, that should be the first warning sign. Because when the US regime protests started here in Bangkok in 2014, the Western media savaged them. They called them undemocratic, rabble, monarchists, conservative extremists, ultra monarchists, and I mean they were smearing them because it was reversing a U.S. color revolution, and so that is how you could tell if you didn't want to go and follow the money to all the different organizations involved. So that's the first warning sign, and then look at what Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, look at what they're saying and how they're covering it. And then if you can see the names of organizations mentioned in like a BBC article, just do a really quick search, whatever the name of the organization is, and then NED.org or National Endowment for Democracy, Open Society. You put these keywords in and see what pops up. And if you see it constantly returning NED, Open Society, European Commission, Australia Aid, UK Aid, then it's a color revolution.
Brian, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Okie dokie. That was Brian. We had to record in the morning. Brian is in Thailand. We do have a big time difference, and he's no longer available in the evening. So I recorded that earlier this morning. But I thought that was pretty educational. Like, I got the Indonesia, protest wrong. I didn't know. So now I know to pay close attention to who is funding these particular acts. So I will be paying closer attention going forward. And I just think a lot of people don't know. Same thing with what is happening in Nepal. I was hesitant to cover it because I did happen to see information on social media that was saying that this was a color revolution. And I said, well, let me see if I can bring Brian on to talk about this because I know he's over in that area. So we just got to pay attention, right? Like we got to look into like who is funding these uprisings. So yeah. We still have 2 more stories to cover, ladies and gents. Again, the theme is The Truth Hurts. Let's get the comment on Rockfin, and we'll get the super chats on YouTube as well. Thank you, Roger, for the tip on Rockfin. Obama-Joe relationship mirrors JFK-LBJ relationship. Al, we want Black VP. Instead, Joe made them compromise on Kamala. She had no policy page ready to go. It took 43 days before she released her policies, which looked like a book report put together at the last moment, due in May, done the night before. Just some policies that were loosely put together by chewing gum. George Floyd derailed Amy's VP opportunity. Thank you for this one. This is exactly what I mean when I say before you tear down the current system, you better make sure that you've built a parallel system to transition to as soon as the old one is torn down. Otherwise, you'll have a bunch of civil wars. Apparently, this is what our government has always done. What do you call someone that instead of working on improving themselves, they tear down others? Answer, a hater. Haters. Thank you for the Rumble rant, Mark. Sabby, Kamala can make her bathtub collard greens and Chuck Schumer can put cheese on raw hamburgers. Gross. Thank you, Marvin. Did she share her collard green recipe in the book? Oh my gosh. You guys are funny. James says Trump said he was going after BRICS members and Indonesia just joined. Thank you, Helpful Harm. Please ask Brian if Indonesia is in the same situation. Yeah, I did ask him about that. I was curious. I'm like, wait a minute now. All right, ladies and gents, if you haven't smashed the like button, please go ahead and do so. What are you waiting for? Again, the theme is The Truth Hurts, and we're going to do one that is pretty local to me, but yeah, the truth hurts on this one. There was this video going around that is pretty viral, and it's comparing red states to blue states. And they decided to compare Oklahoma to Massachusetts. And I said, oh, they're talking about the state that I'm in. They're talking about Massachusetts. Let me see what they're talking about. Let me see what they got to say. And what I found was interesting about this particular video, I think it was a TikTok vid and it's made its way to X, is that they point out all these positives that we have here in Massachusetts, but they don't tell you the details. Like if I were to watch this video and I had never been to Massachusetts, I would think to myself, holy smokes, why am I living in this state? Let me move there. They got everything. But there is a catch with some of this. So this is the video that is going viral. It was shared by Truth Matters. Interesting. Zach's back with some really interesting and incisive data worth examining. The only upside for red states is they get permission to hate women, gay people, migrants, and Democrats. They would say it's a small price to pay for being at the bottom of the pile. This is the video comparing Oklahoma, a red state, to Massachusetts, a blue state. I've never lived in Oklahoma. If you had, let me know in the chat. But I do live in Massachusetts, so I can say some things about this. Check this out.
Only 2 states in the entire country voted unanimously across every county for the same presidential candidate. Trump won all the counties in Oklahoma, and Harris won all the counties in Massachusetts. And when you compare these states side by side, you really start to wonder why people aren't voting for Democrats. The all-Trump state of Oklahoma is 44th in education, 49th in healthcare, 44th in quality of life, and dead last 50th in test scores.
Pause. He doesn't tell you why. Right. So I lived in, some of the southern states. I lived in South Carolina. I lived in North Carolina. I lived in Georgia, back in the day. Oftentimes, this is why I was concerned about the cuts also for Medicaid, is that a lot of these red states, particularly the ones in the South, I guess Oklahoma is like, what do we call Oklahoma? The Plains, the Southwest or whatever. I don't know. Oftentimes, these states don't have as much money. Same thing if you were to look at Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, South Carolina, they don't have as much money as the blue states, right? So when he points to these and he says 44th in education, well, property taxes go towards resources for public schools. So if you don't have a lot of money in the state, then you're not going to have a high ranking in education. These things go hand in hand. 49th in healthcare, again, they don't have a lot of money in that state. 44th in quality of life. This all goes back to money. And of course, 50th in test scores. If you're 44th in education, you're obviously not going to be like in the top 15 for test scores. Let's continue on.
When you look at Massachusetts, they are first in education, second in healthcare, first in quality of life, and first in test scores. Kind of hard to argue for Oklahoma here. And it's not just...
Go back to Massachusetts. So see, here's the comparison, right? Yeah, Massachusetts is first in public education, second in healthcare, first in quality of life, first in test scores. But that's because I'm going to show you the data. There's a lot of money here. That's the part that's missing from this viral video. Money, resources, right? So I'll break all this down for you. Let him finish.
First in quality of life and first in test scores. Kind of hard to argue for Oklahoma here. And it's not just about who they voted for in the election. This is a Republican-run state, and these are the results of that Republican leadership. And this is a state run by Democrats, and those are the results of a state run by Democrats. And if you look at other red states, you'll find the same exact low-quality outcomes you see here. And if you look at other substantially blue states like Massachusetts, you'll see similar outcomes to what you see there, because Democratic policies work and Republican policies don't, because Republican policies go, I don't want to spend any money on anything. We're just going to hope it all works out. It doesn't. And Democratic places go, we need to spend money on basic infrastructure to support people. And what do you know? That works out.
So let's look at this really quick. Again, a lot of this comes down to money. What's the largest city in Oklahoma? Is it Oklahoma City or is it Tulsa? Probably one of those two, right? Okay. The largest city in Massachusetts is Boston. How many people live in Oklahoma City and Tulsa? How many people live in Boston? There's more people in Boston. You have more people. You should have more money, more property taxes, more money towards public education, right? So I'm not sure Oklahoma was the best state to compare to Massachusetts. We're talking about two different populations of people, right? There's way more people over in Massachusetts. But what he doesn't explain to you is the why. And I think this is important, right? He doesn't get into the details. Yes, it's true. We are number one or number two in many categories. But what he doesn't show you is how expensive it is to live in Massachusetts. Did you know this? Massachusetts is now the most expensive state for a family to live comfortably. This is not an exaggeration. For a single person, Massachusetts is the second most expensive state to live comfortably. This is something I wanted to point out. Regardless if you have a family here or not, it's expensive. It is expensive. If you have lived in a state that has a lower cost of living and you move here, you will feel it. Yes, you're going to make more because the pay is higher, but the rent is higher, like way, 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 way higher, right? So let's get into some of these numbers because I think these TikTok videos, sometimes they leave out details. A Massachusetts family income needs to be $313,000, over $313,000 to live comfortably. Last year, a 4-person household needed an income of $301,000 to do so. So this is important. But by the way, that's not to be rich, that's to live comfortably. So if you have $300,000 in Oklahoma, that is going to go a lot further than it will in Massachusetts. That's something that people need to understand. So, we really got to get into these things. A lot of people don't want to talk about this, but these numbers are not an exaggeration. If you meet someone here that has a job and they make $50,000 a year, that is nothing here. Nothing. And people can say, well, you can go out to Western Mass. To be honest with you, even Western Mass is starting to increase in price because people have been moving from the eastern part of the state to the western part of the state. Like I said, when you start to move, an influx of people come in, they're going to start to increase the prices, increase the rent. That's how it goes. So this is important for people to know because people will see that video and go, oh my God, why am I not living in Massachusetts? So you need to see this. Meanwhile, the most expensive state for a single person to live comfortable is Hawaii with a $124,000 salary needed. For single individuals, Massachusetts is a close second with a yearly income of $120,000 needed. So I'm so glad they broke this down for single people too. That's what you need to make in Massachusetts just to be comfortable. Just to be comfortable. And by the way, that doesn't include if you have any debt. That doesn't include student loan debt. It just doesn't. Like, of course, like car payment, medical debt, that doesn't include those things. $120,000 a year to live comfortably. Before taxes. That's before taxes too, by the way. So keep that in mind. This is what I was talking about. Okay? So these things need to be said. At the other end of the spectrum, the cheapest state for a family of 4 to live comfortably is Mississippi. I believe this. At over $186,000. For a single person, West Virginia ranked the cheapest at $78,000, right? And West Virginia is a very poor state. Also low ranking in healthcare and education. There's a lot of issues with West Virginia, which we've covered before on this show. But I think when you make those videos for TikTok, it's kind of important to mention things like this. Most expensive state for a family to live comfortably. There's more. Here's another one. Massachusetts is the most expensive state to raise a child. See, this report was released this year, March of 2025. When we get into my documentary, when I release that documentary, some of these things you're going to see. This is what I was talking about. Like, the wealth gap here is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So people need to see these types of things. Most expensive state to raise a child. It costs more annually to raise a child in Massachusetts than some people make in a year. Parents Magazine released a state-by-state breakdown and how much it costs to raise a child in each state, and Massachusetts came in at number 1. Peep this number, fam. Let's make this bigger. The list is based on a 2024 study from Smart Asset. It found that parents in Massachusetts spend on average nearly $650,000 on a child by the time the child turns 18 years old. Okay. Now, let's put these two numbers together. If they are telling you that a family's income needs to be over $313,000 to live comfortably in Massachusetts, and then they're telling you that you spend over $650,000 on a child, just one, by the time they turn 18, it sounds like you may need more than $313,000. You know, just in case something creeps up, something happens. Most expensive place to live a child. So yes, we have the number 1, public schools. They're ranked number 1. But this is also the most expensive place to raise a child. Why is that important? That's important because you see these numbers, you see that data, and you're like, wow, that would be a great place to live and da-da-da. But that opportunity is not going to be open to everyone. The best public schools, which I'll show you, the best public schools are in the wealthy towns. That's just a reality. So we're number 1 in public education, but that doesn't mean that every public school here is good. At one point in Lawrence, Massachusetts in particular, the state had to come in and take over the schools because the schools were performing so poorly. All of this matters. What that tells you is that in order to have access to the best public schools in Massachusetts, you need to have something called money. This is not accessible to everyone. Something else that's left out that I think is important to mention, and that's this one. Massachusetts income gap is one of the largest in the country. This was released September 2024. I told you about the wealth inequality gap that we have in Massachusetts. They're trying to tell you here what defines middle class. According to the new census information, the income gap in Massachusetts is one of the largest in the country. In 2023, this is what they found. The median household annual income nationwide is $80,000. In Massachusetts, the median is well over $106,000. The report defines middle class based on that number and determine a household income between $71,000 and $213,000 to be middle class in Massachusetts. So Jay Zagorski, he's an economics professor at BU. He said there are clearly people in Massachusetts who are struggling, who aren't making very large figures, but there are people who are doing quite well. Let's get into the income gap. The data shows about 20% of households report incomes over $200,000, but 27 report earning less than $50,000 a year. This is that big income gap. You see the difference? So there's not as many people making that over 200. Now, why does that number matter? If they told you you need to make over $313,000 to raise, to have a family of 4 in Massachusetts to live comfortably, then that means the majority is not living comfortably because 27% are making less than $50,000 a year. And if you're making less than the $313,000 and you have a family of 4, you're not living comfortably in Massachusetts. These things are all important. It goes on to say here, Martinez said that the growing gap suggests more families are falling out of the middle class. Ding, ding, ding. Yes, it is happening. There's more information. Some of you know about this, some of you don't. But this is another study that came through, which I covered before. Another divide in Massachusetts. That's the racial wealth gap. The wealth gap, the racial divide in Massachusetts. These are the numbers that gave people a lot of pause. A study found that the median net worth of Black families in Massachusetts was $8. Their white counterparts had a median net worth of $247,000. So all the things I'm mentioning to you, these things need to be mentioned, that there is a large, significantly racial wealth gap in Massachusetts. There's a income wealth gap in Massachusetts. It's one of the most expensive places to raise a child. You need to make over $313,000 a year to live comfortably as a family of four in Massachusetts. All of these things tell you what? It tells you that everything that he showed you in that video about Massachusetts, it tells you that those opportunities are only for a select few, the people who have the money, the people who have net worth. And based on the racial wealth gap here, you can see is not many black people. Black net worth is $8 compared to $247,000. What does that tell you about Massachusetts? When we talk about the best schools, what does that tell you? Who's going to those best schools? Because I can tell you, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you. Let's get to the millionaires. This is another important part. More millionaires in Massachusetts despite the surtax. Check this out. I want you to see how many millionaires are living here. Oh, shoot balls. Is this one I got to sign in for? I hate when they do this, man. Hold on one second. Everybody sign in to read my article. Okay, here we go. Back at you. Check this out, fam. Okay? The millionaires in Massachusetts. Okay? Check this out. Massachusetts has seen a 38.6 jump in the number of millionaire residents since voters approved a 4% surtax of high earners in 2022. This debunks the myth that if you tax the millionaires, they're all going to leave the state. I told you guys that wasn't happening here. So they haven't left. In fact, we have more millionaires now. It goes on to show you here the number of individuals with a net worth over 1 million grew from over 441,000 in 2022 to over 612,000 in 2024. We have over 612,000 millionaires in Massachusetts. They got the best schools. They're living in the places where there are the best public schools in Massachusetts. And if some of them are choosing to live in Boston, which by the way, Boston does not have, they're not ranked up there high at all. But if some of them are living in Boston, you can betcha their kids are going to private school or Boston Latin, right? All of these things matter. Context matters. Here's something else. The public schools. Let's dive into this. Massachusetts public schools are the best in the country. This is true. This is true. Now, we need to connect the dots. We just have an increase of millionaires from over 440,000 to over 612,000. So we have an increase in millionaires. That means there's more money coming into the state. That means more money from property taxes, which means that those schools in their towns are going to have more resources. The more resources the school have, the more likely the students are to perform better, higher test scores, which means the schools will be higher ranked. The problem that is not mentioned from that TikTok video is that this is a select number of towns. It's not the majority of Massachusetts, but in those towns, because they have a lot of money and because those schools are ranked so high, it basically kind of does well for the whole state. Does that make sense? So we need to connect the dots, and I'm going to show you the best school districts, and you're going to see where the money comes into play. 2025, the best school districts in Massachusetts. Number one is Weston. I can tell you about some of these places. Weston, Massachusetts, Weston Public Schools. Just to give you an idea, Big Papi, also known as his government name is David Ortiz, Big Poppy lived in Weston, Massachusetts. That's who's out in Weston. It's the wealthiest town in Massachusetts. So you have Red Sox players that lived out there, etc. So you see, are they number one? Okay, more money, more property taxes, more resources for the schools. Number two, public schools of Brookline. Brookline is right next to Boston. It's a town. I don't know why it needs to be a town. Like, it literally looks like someone just took a bite out of Boston, but there is a lot of money in Brookline, right? So this is where like the Kraft family comes from. Robert Kraft, who owns the Patriots, he's a billionaire. There's a lot of money there. So of course they're number two. Money, money, money. Belmont public schools, also wealthy town. Mitt Romney lived in Belmont, just to give you an idea. These are not places that Sabby lives. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to have some money to live there, honey. I don't think you can find one house in Belmont for under $1 million, or Weston, and damn sure not Brookline. Let's go on. 4, Lexington public schools, also very wealthy. Lexington is next to Concord, Massachusetts. A lot of like, you have like a lot of like MIT professors, Harvard professors that live out that way. You got to have some money there too. Hopkinton public schools, same, wealthy town. Wayland public schools, wealthy town. Everybody seeing a pattern? Winchester public schools, rank 7, wealthy town. Newton, which Newton is kind of fallen on this list from when I first moved here. Newton is number 8. Newton public schools, also wealthy town. You do have a lot of MIT and Harvard professors that live like in Newton. Like, you can't find a house there for under $1 million. I think does Jalen, well, not Jalen, Jason Tatum. I think Jason Tatum from the Boston Celtics just bought a house in Newton. Yeah, these are rich towns, you guys. Wellesley public schools, number 9, same thing, wealthy town. And then we get to number 10, which is Sharon public schools. That's like in the south of Boston. Also, wealthier town. What you do not see, and as I scroll down, you do not see Boston, right? You don't see Boston. You see a lot of W's. Needham. That's where Joseph Kennedy III lives, in Needham. I'm trying to tell you how expensive these places are. So the point that I want to make is this. Certain people have access to those top-ranked public schools, and that's people that have money. So the statistics, the data that he provided to you, that mainly applies to people who have money, capital, and resources. That's what we always have to bring it back to, following the money. I don't think a lot of people realize how expensive it is to live here. You know, everybody knows New York is expensive, but I feel like a lot of people don't realize how expensive Massachusetts actually is. So yeah, we're number 1 in public schools, but you got to pay for that type of education. You got to have money for that. We're number 2 in healthcare, but again, like I said, you know, we have some of the best hospitals. That helps. But when you see my documentary, I think you're going to see the difference. That this is the side of Boston that you see a lot of times that people are familiar with. The Harvard, the MIT, the BU, like the Boston area. This is what a lot of people are familiar with. What a lot of people are not familiar with is the side of Boston that I show you in my documentary. And those are the largest neighborhoods in Boston that a lot of people will just, if you came here as a tourist, you're not going to be in those neighborhoods. That's just how it is. So when you see these videos of red states compared to blue states, I think context is important. And I think that when you see that a state has number 1 schools, number 1 this or number 2 that, I think what's left out of that equation is the cost of living. Truth hurts. Let's go to some of the comments here, ladies and gents. Hey. Travers says context is everything. Yes, it is. We can go to part 3 for type VNC, Eric. Thank you, New York Varsity. They failed to mention that the healthcare initiative was spearheaded by Mitt Romney, a GOPer, which later became known as Obamacare. That's true. It was originally Romney Care. Becky said what industries are in Massachusetts: healthcare, tech, education. About education, I mean higher education, because there's a lot of colleges here. But there's a lot of people here that work in tech. I think we're number 2 in startups after Silicon Valley. Like that's kind of taken over a big part. Pine said, what is this Latin school in Boston? It's kind of like a charter school. It's one of the schools you have to test in to get into. It's a good school. Like if you live in Boston and you want to go to Boston Latin, it's a good school to go to, but you have to test into it. When I lived in North Carolina, we used to call these magnet schools. So yeah. All right. I think we have comments on Rockfin, and then we'll get to the last story. Hey, shake it off. Shake it off. Thank you for the tip, Stephanie. Thanks, Sabby, for the important interview with Brian Burlatek. We really need to be skeptical about everything our government is doing. The power elites feel threatened, scared, and desperate. And even though our empire is probably in decline, so much damage can be done before it fizzles. The dangerous time is when an empire is dying. Yeah, I know we're at that stage. Thank you, Roger. Still want to get rid of property taxes, Sab? If so, you'd still have to find an alternative source of revenue. Even public banks, which is what Oklahoma can use. Since Oklahoma is a CBI state, they can get it. Even with a local public bank, you still need tax revenue as deposits. Well, I always say the federal government can fund those public schools just like they fund the Dodd schools that I attended. That's kind of how I look at it. Okay, one more story for you guys. This is a really interesting one. So I don't know what happened, but Tucker Carlson has created this 9/11 docuseries, which was supposed to be released Thursday. And from what I can tell, and maybe I'm just missing something, I checked the website and the docuseries is not released. So maybe there's like a pushback, maybe there's technical difficulties, or I often wonder, did someone speak to Tucker Carlson? Did somebody call him? Did he get a talking to? Is what I'm asking. Because he did talk about this docuseries on Piers Morgan's show, and this goes with the poll question there. What do you guys believe about the 9/11 narrative? There are 3 parts in this conversation I want to tap into. Let's go ahead and get started here.
So Tucker, the biggest lies perpetrated on the American people from 9/11?
Well, the core lie is the 9/11 Commission itself, which was an instrument, a political instrument of the Bush administration run by a guy called Philip Zelikow. And from beginning to end, he stage managed the explanation for 9/11 in a way that benefited the neoconservative factions within the Bush administration. The point was to leverage the pain and outrage of that day and use it to convince Americans that we ought to invade Iraq, which of course had nothing whatsoever to do with 9/11. And he wrote the commission report with that in mind. And by the way, he wrote it before the investigation took place. He literally sketched it out before they knew what the facts were. And then during the course of the investigation, he systematically, I'm not guessing, by the way, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is the testimony of people who are directly involved in the commission. Chairman Tom Kean, the former governor of New Jersey, Republican governor, he stage managed the entire thing and prevented investigators from looking into like core questions. For example, the CIA was fully aware that many of the hijackers who committed 9/11 were in the United States. They had followed them, as the trailer suggests, around the world. 11 out of the 19 hijackers had visas for travel to the United States issued in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, at exactly the moment that John Brennan was the station chief for the CIA in Saudi Arabia. They knew that they were here. They didn't hide the fact that they were here. I mean,
pause here for just a second. There was a series I watched a couple of years ago on Hulu. It was called The Looming Tower. I'm not sure if you have seen it. If it's still there, you should definitely check it out. That was in the show The Looming Tower, right? So it wasn't a docuseries, but it was like, just like a drama series about it. And what I did is while I was watching each episode, after each episode, I would just kind of, research myself to see what was real and what was exaggerated. Because even in these, like, this episode is based on a true story. Even with those, sometimes there are dramatic events that are added there just for entertainment aspect. And so I always check those episodes after I watch them to see what in that episode actually happened and what was just added for entertainment value. And one of the things that really took me by surprise was what Tucker Carlson had just mentioned, that the CIA did in fact know that they were already here in the country. That was the first time I heard that when I watched that show. And I saw that show maybe 6 years ago. I forget. It's been a while. Why did more people know about that? And why didn't more people ask questions about that? So they knew all this time that they were here, but they did nothing about it. Furthermore, they did not give that information to the FBI. So this is the reason why, one of the reasons why people do have questions about what really happened that day. And I don't think you should call those people nut jobs or whacks or conspiracists. I think that you should sit back and maybe ask yourself why you aren't asking any damn questions. Why was some of this information hidden from you? Why was it kept from you? Why are we finding out things years later that was totally omitted from the conversation at that point in time? I mean, come on. Let's not forget, they lied to you about the Iraq War. They told you Saddam had weapons of mass destruction, but you believe everything they tell you today? Wake up, people.
Khalid al-Mihdhar, who was a 26-year-old Saudi with the plane that hit the Pentagon, was in the San Diego phone book, and he was being followed by the CIA. I mean, this is all documented, and not just by the CIA, by foreign intel services, probably the British, possibly the French, definitely the Israelis. They knew. Now, I'm not alleging that they committed 9/11, but I am stating, because it's a fact, that they were aware the hijackers were in the U.S. and were planning a terror attack against the United States, and they never passed that information to the FBI, to local police, much less to the American public, and 3,000 people died as a result. So what is that? Huge parts of the 9/11 story were left out of the commission report. For example, what happened to Building 7, which was not only not next to the Twin Towers, which were hit by airplanes, but had a building in between itself and those buildings, collapsed that afternoon for reasons that no one has been able to explain since. You're not a lunatic for asking. There's no plausible explanation for how that building collapsed.
Well, so let's talk
That's
about that.
not even mentioned.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment,
Yes.
because it's one of the many things that have raged since. If you look into the investigation into Tower 7, the findings of the investigation into it were that the North Tower, when it came down, had set off a load of fires in Building 7. And it was a steel structure and shouldn't have gone down, but it did. That these fires burned all afternoon, and I think it was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon or something. The tower eventually gave way to the welter of fires raging inside it, and it was the only time that had happened to a structure that was built in that way. However, there has been another tower very similar to that in structure, which has since gone down in Tehran. So it's no longer the only one. In other words, there is another example of a tower like that collapsing. So when it comes to the specific theory about that, what is the alternative explanation? I mean, if you're examining another theory other than the one that the investigation concluded was simply that the North Tower came down, fires were set off in Tower 7, and then it eventually collapsed, what is the other theory which we should give more credence to?
I don't know. I don't know that the onus is on me or anyone who seeks the truth about what happened to come up with an alternative theory. The onus is on federal authorities to explain why, for example, they never investigated it. Why, for example, the rubble and the steel from that building was carted off within hours and sent out of the country to Asia. Why, for example, an analysis done not by kooks, but by chemists found traces of explosive material in the dust from that day. Why structural engineers who have kind of no skin in this game came to the conclusion that that just couldn't happen based on all available evidence, and that none of that is addressed at all or even mentioned in the 9/11 report. So, and there are all kinds of anomalies, as I know that you're fully aware, and there are possible explanations to explain all of them. For example, the BBC report on air saying the building had fallen when it hadn't fallen yet. There are all sorts of reasons to wonder, like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, let's talk about this for just a second. I don't know if every one of you watching some of you may not have been born at that time. It's interesting because sometimes it seems like it was just yesterday. But I remember that day very, very well. I remember I was going to class, and I remember that I ran into one of my friends who told me not to move to New York, not to go to New York or something. I was like, what are you talking about? And that was just in passing. I hadn't turned on the TV. It's just this thing that I do. Like when I'm getting ready in the morning, I don't turn on the TV because it's a distraction for me. I didn't find out until I got to class when people were talking about it. And that's when it hit me like, okay, I should probably look at the news. Like I really was in the dark. But I do remember the buildings like coming down. And even then, to me, it was so hard for me to believe it at first because it looked like a movie, right? And I remember, getting on the phone and calling everyone that I know that either worked in the city or lived in the city. There were other attacks also. People that I knew that were near, like Walter Reed, I tried to contact. But I'm not an engineer, so I can't dive into, well, this is what I think really happened with those. I really don't know when it comes to the structural engineering. But I will say people have a right to ask questions. And it seems like to me with this docuseries, based on what I've heard about it, and I saw the trailer, it seems like it's a series of interviews where he talked to people that were directly involved in either the investigation or maybe were in the area at that point in time. So it doesn't seem like it's just something he made where he's like, let me just sit down and tell you what I think happened, like that type of thing. And it's weird to me that we still till this day have people in this country that tell us we shouldn't question what happened in any major event when our government has lied to us so many times. Like all in all, none of these things really made sense to me. The CIA knew that they were in the country, but they decided not to do anything about it. Why not? Why would they not do anything about it? Why would they not even give that information to the FBI? Right? So there's so many things with this particular situation that I never really got the answers to.
But it's not incumbent on us to provide explanation. It's incumbent on the people running the government and running the supposed investigation into this to tell us, like, what was that? And
I have a very open mind. The reason I'm interested to watch your documentary series, I have a genuinely open mind, and actually, I would say it's been more opened generally about this kind of thing since the COVID pandemic. That I was too, I think, credulous about what the authorities were saying through the pandemic to my detriment. You and I have had this conversation. So I'm actually have a very open mind about this. I mean, on the specifics, for example, the BBC report you mentioned was based on a false Reuters report that they retracted soon afterwards and said it shouldn't have gone out. And the building, you could see the building behind the BBC journal. So it was obviously ludicrous. CNN did the same thing. But having been in the news game as you have, on big breaking news stories, fog of war stuff happens. And if it was a genuine error by Reuters, okay. I remember, for example, just as a comparison, I remember being on air at CNN when the hurricane came through, Hurricane Sandy burst through Manhattan. If you were probably at Fox then, I think. But if you remember, half the lights went out in lower Manhattan. And I remember a report coming from CNN that the stock exchange was underwater. And that had an immediate impact on global markets. And it turned out that was a false report. So these things can happen. U.S. national debt is more than...
We're not going to do your ad, Pierce. Yeah, those things can happen. I'm not sure if that was a fair comparison. Hurricane Sandy, comparing that to 9/11. I want to get to this part here as well.
Well, we know that people did know more than we've been told. I mean, somebody shorted the airlines and a bunch of the banks that were affected. Now, this is not a conspiracy theory. It's not a guess. This is publicly available information. Now, the FBI found out the identity of the person or institution that shorted these events on 9/11 and made a huge amount of money by doing that, but never released that information. So why can't we know who clearly had foreknowledge? I mean, if you're shorting American Airlines a week before 9/11, when no one knows it's coming, I think you should have to explain why you did that. And if you're shorting Barclays and banks that were affected by 9/11, why can't we know who you are? These are public markets, by the way. This is not private equity. This is publicly traded equities. So I wonder about that. So clearly, yes, there was foreknowledge. By the way, there was a team. This is according to the FBI, by the way. This is the FBI saying there was a team of clearly intel-connected foreigners who were arrested after 9/11, as you well know, videotaping the terror attacks. I'm almost verbatim quoting from the FBI assessment of this.
So I'm not sure if this part here, if he's referring to the image of what was described as the dancing Israelis. I'm not sure if that's who he's referring to. I don't know, but that's probably who he's referring to. But that in itself, like that to me never made any sense either. Like that they were questioned, they were taken in and they were questioned and just like let go. Like, why were they happy? Why were they dancing? Why were they? I never understood that. And it's just weird to me that like that was just like let go. Like just like boop, bond, nothing to see here. Bye. Like, really? You know, it's just, and I want to tell you guys, if you haven't seen it, if it's still on Hulu, look it up. It's called The Looming Tower. And if you have time, watch it, because some of the things that I was just like, why didn't we know about some of these things at that point in time? Like that the FBI, one guy in particular that was working for the FBI was getting very, very close. Now, I think his name was John. I have to check. I think his name was John. He died in one of the towers. Now, he was able to get out at first, but he went back in to help other people get out to safety, and he ended up dying in one of the towers. Look him up. You can find out. He's on Wikipedia. Just search John FBI Looming Tower 9/11. He'll come up. I forget his last name. Somebody in the chat probably knows. But he was getting very close, and from what I gathered, it seemed like if he would have had the information that the CIA had, that probably wouldn't have happened based on the information I saw, not just in that show, but also what I read afterwards. It does seem like O'Neill, thank you, John O'Neill. It seems like if he had that information from the CIA, it seems like he that could have been prevented. And that's one of the frustrating things when you're watching that show and then you look up the information for yourself, you're like, oh my God, that really was true. So it's just, it's frustrating. So I think this docuseries definitely does need to be published. It does need to be released.
And the FBI determined that they apparently had foreknowledge of the attacks. So why can't we know more about that? Exactly. Shut up. That's bigoted. No, this is my country, actually. I know people who died on 9/11. Everything was changed because of it. I promptly went off to the Middle East, just like everyone else in our business. I'm sure you did as well. And then we lost our civil liberties at home. We immediately started torturing people and locking up people for years. They are still locked up in Guantanamo Bay with no charges at all.
And also, there was a strong rise of Islamophobia after September 11 as well. And this is something, you know, I think if you weren't born during this time, or maybe you were very young, you would not be aware of unless you read about it or heard about it later on. At that point in time, I don't think this was a good place to be for Muslim Americans, for Arab Americans. There was a lot of Islamophobia after September 11. And I just knew people that did not feel safe. And I understood why. And I think that when I look at how we've kind of grown in ways like the things that people were saying about Arab Americans at that time, the things that people were saying about Muslim people at that time. And then I look at how many of us decided to hit the streets and rise up for people in Gaza. That gives me some hope that there are changes that are happening. But I would say during that time, if you were Muslim American in the United States, especially if you were wearing like a hijab, I would say it was not a safe place for you to be at that point in time.
And the rest of us, very much me included, nodded our heads and were like, yeah, they're bad. They're Muslim terrorists. Now, I think a lot of them were bad, and they were Muslim terrorists. On the other hand, if your government is allowed to torture people and lock them up indefinitely without charging them, how long before they do that to you? We don't do that here. And I know it's very common in the UK now, which is an authoritarian country. We don't want that here. And 9/11 dramatically changed our assumptions about what the government is allowed to do. So, and by the way, I should say, the main beneficiary in the United States of those attacks was the CIA, which allowed them to happen. So the CIA budget became, more than doubled. Of course, we're not allowed to know what the CIA budget is, even in government. This is a fact, by the way. If you ask a high-level official at the White House currently, what's the CIA's full budget? They can't tell you. It is a secret that is so closely guarded that even people in charge of administering the government don't know what their budget is. But Tucker, it's more than twice what it was before 9/11.
Okay, but what you're
So one thing to keep in mind is that Tucker can kind of get away with saying some of these things because, and I guess, not get targeted because from what I understand, his father was, CIA. So just that's something to keep in mind, that he can kind of go places the rest of us can't go. Just to be honest with you, at one point, I remember Tucker Carlson said that he thought about joining the CIA, like when he was younger or whatever. But just keep that in mind, folks. Because I think sometimes people see these things and they're like, oh, well, Tucker Carlson did it, so I can do it too. Like, some people are protected. Never forget that.
You're suggesting with your phraseology about that is that the CIA were part of a kind of inside track knowledge about what may happen, which is obviously an incredibly serious
No, I'm not
charge.
suggesting that. I'm not suggesting that. I'm stating the facts, which are that the CIA was fully aware that many of these hijackers were here, that those visas were issued in a country with which we have very close security service cooperation at a time when John Brennan was running a station there.
But that's different to saying that they knew what was going to happen.
Well, they actually did know that these people were planning a terror attack because they surveilled a meeting planning it in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, a year before, and then followed the guy as he came to the United States and arrived in San Diego for flight training. So again, I'm not guessing about any of this. These are established facts. There's no person, including then CIA Director George Tenet, who would deny this. They'll say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Okay, fine, whatever. Attack my character as you will, but tell me how I'm wrong. And of course, I'm not wrong. So
well,
I'm not alleging or suggesting anything.
I'm not saying you're right or wrong or anything.
And they were from Saudi Arabia, right? But we went to war with Iraq. It was a question I even had at that time. I was like, why are we going? What? Saudi Arabia was an ally of the United States and still is an ally of the United States. But that question, like if you were to ask people that question, people were just kind of like, but it didn't make any sense to me. I'm like, okay, so they were from Saudi Arabia, but we're going to war against Iraq? And people say, well, yeah, we're going to war with Iraq because Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. I'm like, okay, what does that have to do with September 11th? You can ask those questions back then. People got to understand, like the people who came out against the Iraq war during that time were brave. People lost their jobs. Like I told you, Phil Donahue, talk show host, he lost his job because he was against the war in Iraq. Told you the Dixie Chicks got canceled. I think they're now just the Chicks. It's easier to talk about it now, but during that time, Then we get into the Israel part. Listen to this. He is asking him if he thinks that Israel is a terrorist state.
at the hands of the IDF. There are many on the pro-Palestinian side who say that Israel is behaving like terrorists too in the way that they have gone about conducting this war. Would you go as far as to say that?
One of the things that I really object to now is this relentless focus on Israel, which, by the way, is a foreign country that I have nothing to do with other than having been a visitor there and really enjoyed it. And it's now at the center of the conversation in my country when my country is degrading at high speed. We have a lot of concerns here. I just resent the kind of solipsism that pulls everything back to the concerns of a foreign country. And that's the litmus test for everything. Well, is Israel bad? How dare you say that? Are you going to go out on a limb and criticize Israel? What about my country? Every country commits terror because leaders, drunk on hubris, imagine that they can do things that no human being is permitted to do. And
uh-oh. There it is. He said every country. That includes Israel. Pierce doesn't like that comment.
First on that list is killing people who didn't do anything wrong. That is the ultimate sin. And it happens in every country, in every period. Of course, Israel meets that definition. I mean, obviously, but so does my government. And not always. And I think we try harder. Certainly, we try harder than Israel is trying. But we have definitely done that. And it's not controversial to say that. It's not controversial to say that things the U.S. government has done have intentionally murdered people who didn't do anything wrong. People are like, yeah, that's right. But you say that about Benjamin Netanyahu, who has nothing to do with me at all. I don't live there. I don't want to live there. I've got nothing to do with that. Then you're somehow a criminal. That whole frame to me is insane, and I'm not participating with it. Israel is not the litmus test. How you feel about your own country, what you do to improve or degrade your own country, that's the litmus test for me. Not how you feel about some foreign country, period.
Well,
So
let
I'm
me
just not
give you,
playing
let me,
And then he said period. He did the period, you guys. He said the period. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, I will say this. You guys can watch the rest of that on Piers Morgan's channel, but I did just want to say I hope that docuseries is still being released. And it could have something to do with, Charlie Kirk's death. Maybe that's why it was not released for Thursday as planned. But like I said, people have questions, man. People have questions. And if our government didn't hide things from us, people wouldn't have all these questions. I don't think that, I've said this before, I don't think anything to do with military and all this kind of stuff, these wars, everything that's happened, assassinations, etc. I don't think any of those things should be classified. I think we have a right to know. That's my take on that. And speaking of Charlie Kirk, one thing I do want to say, I already made a video about that and posted that video earlier this morning, but I do want to give an update here for those of you on social media. I just want to let you know, I wasn't kidding when I said that the establishment would look for a way to use this to censor more, go after people more, etc. I have already been told in private, and I've already seen a couple of these happen already on social media, that companies are being told to fire people depending on how they responded or reacted to the death of Charlie Kirk. Ron DeSantis has said that he will suspend teachers in Florida depending on how they respond. There are a number of accounts on X that are reporting people. So what I will tell you guys, be very careful. And I've said this so many times, be very careful what you post on social media, right? So I don't want anyone to lose their job. I really don't. But just in general, be very careful what you post on social media. But this is what I predicted earlier today when I made that video, was that they're going to increase police state, surveillance state, censorship, etc. So be careful, guys. Be careful. Let's get that poll. All right. Thank you for the poll, honey buns. We have 1,841 votes. Do you believe the narrative about September 11? 5% said yes. 80%, that's a strong 80%. 80% said hell no. 8% said somewhat, but I have questions. And 8% said, I don't know. Interesting. Thank you guys so much. Hey, hey, hey. All right, guys, that is it for me tonight. I'll be live again on Sunday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Hope to see you there. Oh, I forgot the super chats. I'm sorry. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Sabby. You rock. Thank you. And thank you, New York Varsity. If Sabby had a group chat right now up till 3 a.m., I wish I could, but I have to get up actually at like 4:30 in the morning. Yeah, I should get to bed. It's 11 o'clock. Let me get out of here. All right, guys. Have a good night. Keep up the fight. Holy crap.